Evening. Welcome to the planning board meeting of March 12th.
Which is why
We are sticking to since we found out the last meeting that we have a hard cutoff at 10 and the meeting is not continued on HCAM after 10, we're going to do our best to end at 10 o'clock and keep the momentum going. The first item on the agenda is the continued hearing proposed bylaw and zoning map. I think the members of the board, if you've looked at your memo, we've got some language changes. And let's address amendment to amend section 210-125. Elaine, do you want to say anything on the updates?
Well, the board was interested in hearing from someone from the Board of Appeals, so the
Yes.
chair of the Board of Appeals is here this evening for this one and the accessory family dwelling.
Okay. You want to come up?
Sure.
Yeah.
Table. So I'll be here for the next two, I think.
Yeah.
Hello to the planning board, Mark Hyman, chair of the zoning board of appeals, also a member of ZAC. With respect to 210-125, the reason we brought this particular one up to ZAC was in part because it, as you, I think, recognized, fits to an extent with the accessory dwelling unit as well. They kind of fit together. But mainly because we had a request, and it was one of the first ones that I had seen under 210-125, and it actually was for conversion of a previous accessory dwelling unit into a two-unit building. And I hadn't dealt with 210-125 before, so I looked back at the details for it, tried to figure out what the purpose was. And we really couldn't come up with anything other than what actually is said in the bylaw that says for rental purposes, which I now understand from town council we can't actually enforce anyway. So I'm not sure what the original purpose of 210-125 is, but it seems to be, in essence, kind of a workaround for folks to operate under to either avoid some of the requirements of the duplex rule or of the accessory dwelling rule, at least in principle. So I agree. I think it needs to be considered in light of those other two. Within the perspective of ZAC, one of the things that we were interested in was requiring owner occupancy, because there was no requirement for that in the existing bylaw, and for limiting to some extent the number of dwelling units, because we didn't want to, I think, encourage kind of informal apartment buildings that weren't really considered formally by this board. So I think that was what went into 210-125. I would agree with the town council to a degree that depending on what's done with 210-126, there may not be a reason for this anymore, particularly if the rental piece can't be enforced. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Questions from the board?
So, I'm sorry, I thought it was the, I didn't see that. I thought it was the owner occupied piece that couldn't be enforced. That,
Well,
do I have
it's
it wrong?
difficult to enforce, but for rental purposes is not legal anymore
Okay.
because
So-
we can't regulate forms of ownership.
Okay, that's where I got it, because regulating forms of ownership, okay, because I thought it was the owner piece, okay.
Right. Right there.
So Mark, for section 210-125, what do you suggest? Okay, so you remember Zach, and you're on zoning board of appeals. For clarity, what are you suggesting the wording should be? I mean, you're in agreement with what the town council is saying, but what's your? Are you saying we should just let go of it altogether? I'm a little confused.
I mean, I think it could certainly be considered to let go of it altogether. I can't speak for ZAC. ZAC had recommended the changes that we have before you.
But then the feedback came after.
Right. I think that this, to an extent, the town council's issue fits well with the reason that we brought it up in the first place from the ZBA. Because when we were asked about this, we looked at the rule, at the bylaw that they were requesting a special permit under to convert an accessory dwelling unit. And we said, well, what does this mean for rental purposes? What, And we ended up deciding, well, that's what the bylaw says, so we'll write it back into the decision and say you can have that permit for rental purposes, whatever that means.
Mhm.
As it turns out, it doesn't actually mean anything that we can enforce. So, I mean, I wish I'd had the town council's input on this previously before, before we finished up with Zach. Maybe we could come to a different position, but I guess the position I would take today is that applying an owner occupancy rule to this and limiting the number of units from 4 to 2 at least limits the potential impact of what is in this bylaw currently. I think I would support going back and looking at it comprehensively, knowing that the rental piece can't be enforced anyway. But I don't think we're at the point where we can really do that in this current year's process.
But I will add to that comment, I think one of the things that was discussed at detail with Zach was the 4 to 2, right, going from 4 down to 2 units, just to kind of limit some of that. I know that you had a concern about that, I think, in the last meeting.
I did, and it wasn't a fully fleshed out concern, but when I went back and looked through the detail that we had for this meeting too, and we really haven't had too many situations where this has come up in the last 20 years. I think there's one that's actually resulted in sort of more than a 2 increase. And I was a little bit compelled by Chuck Joseph's comments about infringing on a property owner's ability to be flexible with what they do with their property. But personally, I think about it, for me and with my lens, I think about it in terms of reducing the opportunities for different kinds of housing, for different kind of neighbors, right? And for example, I have an adult son who's a teacher in Northborough, and his wife is a teacher in Hopkinton, and they're living in a small apartment in a converted house, and they're exactly the kind of tenant that anybody would like to have. And that kind of housing is exactly the kind of housing opportunity that we, might want to have more of in Hopkinton. Well, from my perspective, it's attractive. So and particularly if you didn't think it was necessarily ready to go forward this year, if there's this late feedback, and I guess I will vote not to promote it, but I'm one vote on this board, and then I'm only one vote on town meeting floor. But I actually would like to keep the flexibility, particularly where it hasn't reared its head as a big problem. But that's my thought.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yeah.
I understand your perspective, and I think we discussed some of those concerns in Zach as well. I think from the perspective of the ZBA, at least as it's currently drafted, essentially this particular bylaw, since the rental piece is unenforceable, now it adds a complete workaround to the duplex and to the accessory dwelling unit rules, where essentially in both of those circumstances we have some very specific requirements for each of those. But if someone applies under 125, they need to do none of that. Or at least only as much as the ZBA feels that they can
Choose
reasonably
it.
enforce
Yeah.
with respect to the particular request. Given that this is limited to conversion of existing dwellings, or at least, I guess you could argue you could build a dwelling and then apply for the
Yeah.
permit, but
Yeah.
It's somewhat more limited, and actually what Zach has proposed for accessory dwelling allows for as of right accessory dwellings
Yeah.
within an existing dwelling, subject to certain requirements. But, so I would agree to an extent, under the circumstances, this is probably worth another look, whether it's worth making a change this year to somewhat minimize the impact or not, that you folks in town meeting will have to decide.
So,
Maybe, we're going to order.
I was gonna say, I'm comfortable with the changing it from 4 to 2, and, because with the examples, almost all the examples from the last, since 1997, were converting a single family to a 2-family, so that seems like to be like what people are doing. There's one example of a 2-family being converted to a 3-family.
how many did we have?
Looks like 8.
8,
Yeah,
so
and one of them went up by more than 1 unit in
Only
20
one of them.
years. only one of
So
them.
I'm
One,
con-
they got one person got a permit but didn't exercise it.
So my question would just be that if someone did want to convert a single family to a 3 or 4 family, is there still a process? They would just go through the Board of Appeals?
I think then my reaction would be that would require a variance.
Variance.
And the variance requirements are very tight. It would be dependent on specific instances of that property. I think it would be difficult to get a variance that would stand up under most circumstances.
Well, I was gonna ask to table the conversation and just make a vote on it.
I'll somewhat defer to that, but being a member of ZAC, I just want to kind of weigh in. I do think that going from 1 to 3 or 1 to 4, there's also an impact on the abutters, right? Property values, I've driven by some of these homes, there's a lot more than 2 cars now in some of the yards. So I think that was one of the reasons or rationale as to at least my support behind that, and I would just want to kind of share that back with this board as well.
So, through the chair, I really appreciate that, and when I went to a couple of the classes, I can't remember which class I went to, but on the property values question, it was made very clear to me that that wasn't something that we could really base our decisions on. It's just interesting. And my single-family dwelling has 1 billion cars, so I don't know how, that necessarily plays. I guess I don't feel passionately, I know I'm arguing to not do this. I just don't think it's a problem, and I think that I lean towards more flexibility to a homeowner. And I personally would appreciate more converted apartment-style things for people to live in neighborhoods in a situation like my son and his wife and my grandson.
Since we're at 15 minutes on one and we've got
Yep.
3 ahead and we've got a half hour, somebody want to make a motion on the planning board supporting this at town meeting?
I'll make a motion to support this change as recommended by ZAC with the, utilizing the language as identified by town council.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
We've got what, 3? 4? Opposed?
Nay.
Abstain.
Abstained. So
Carries.
that is a, okay. Yes.
I wanted to actually have the opportunity to say something. Did you just vote to move this forward to town meeting?
It's, everything that we're covering has already been approved for town meeting. It's the recommendation of the board that we're voting on or pulling it off. So,
And with the tie vote, we're recommending?
yeah.
Right?
It wasn't time.
Oh, it was 4.
4-3-1.
So everything that we're talking about now has been recommended to go to town meeting. What we're voting now is whether the planning board is going to recommend it at town meeting. So we just voted to recommend it at town meeting. Okay? Two separate votes. Or we can also vote at this time to pull something off the warrant.
That was going to be my suggestion, was to pull it off.
Well, we've already voted. So let's go on
But
to.
Frank took the thunder out of it.
Let's go on to a discussion of the accessory family dwelling units.
Right, so this one, again, something I brought up based on the experience at Board of Appeals. I think we've seen an uptick in the number of requests for both special permits and variances for accessory family dwelling units. And to an extent, the variances have come because of some of the very tight requirements we have in the current bylaw. That it has to be attached, a common wall, access between the two units, size requirements, a number of things. And because of that, there have been certain circumstances where people have come to us and either brought a plan where it was clearly shoehorned into the current bylaw, even though it didn't really fit architecturally or otherwise with the existing dwelling, or they came with a variance request. And In some circumstances with a request that under the circumstances, trying to take care of an elderly parent or, disabled family member or something along those lines, that's very compelling. But the variance requirements are very high. So it puts the ZBA in a bit of a position to deny a variance because it's really not clearly tied to the shape or topography of the land, but it's clearly something that's deserving of relief. So, those two kind of together are what got us to bring it to Zach and get Zach to think about a little bit what the purposes of the accessory bylaw were, and to look at what was recommended in terms of model bylaws, particularly within Massachusetts. There is actually a model bylaw that the state has put out there that is somewhat more permissive than what our current bylaw is, and that was the one of the sources for what was in what we proposed from Zach. In particular, I think there's two pieces that are worth mentioning. The first is to allow a certain category of accessory dwellings by right. That's small entirely within the existing building. As we discussed with respect to 125, actually you could proceed under 125 for those without proceeding under 126 and be perfectly fine. Perhaps it would be considered a two-family instead of a one-family with accessory. I can't speak to tax implications or mortgages or any of that, but I think that's one piece of the recommendation that we wanted to make, to allow for those where it's very clear there's a good reason for it, and in some circumstances, someone probably won't even come with a special permit if they don't realize they need it. The second was for situations where, given the land or the existing dwelling, that building an addition or making an accommodation within the existing footprint of the building really didn't make sense. So for some of them, they were shoehorning in with a common wall that only overlapped by a foot or two, or they were proposing a completely detached structure, which our bylaw doesn't allow now, meaning that it requires a variance. I think in the model bylaws that the state has put forward, and looking at some comparisons from some other jurisdictions, Zach felt that allowing for detached units by special permit, where in the special permit process you can consider effect on the abutters, you can consider all the typical issues that come up during a public hearing, was something that was worth doing. There is a trend towards more of these small self-contained units for elderly family members that aren't in addition to the structure, and there's something that can be removed later fairly easily if the need is no longer there. So those were the two pieces that we wanted to recommend, to both allow for detached units by special permit, meaning that we limit the number of variances we actually need to address, and to allow for certain accessory dwellings within the footprint of the existing building by right.
Comments from the board?
Question? I guess this is both for Fran and Mark. Would the wording on this change according to the feedback and what we talked about last time, it's very useful that you're here today, Mark, thank you. But last time we were discussing the size of the change. So with this feedback, would that be something that you'd feel comfortable moving forward with, right?
The feedback proposed by town council.
Yep.
I think it's open to more discussion here. My initial thought is I would be, but I think this is one of the things we spent a fair amount of time with at the last meeting, Mark, and it was specifically around dwellings should not exceed, two parts, not exceed more than 1,000 square feet. And the second element shall not exceed 1/3 of the entire gross floor area of a single family dwelling. So I think that needs to be
Yeah,
percolated a little bit more.
to my mind, that's a third big piece
I
of
agree.
it, yeah.
Was size an issue?
Through the chair, size was brought up as an issue. Personally, and speaking for myself, the 1/3 limitation wasn't something I was a great fan of. I thought the overall limitation of 1,000 was probably fine. But there was concern, is it really an accessory dwelling if it's 1,000 square feet in an 1,800 square foot home? So that was where the idea of comparison came up. 1/3 may not be perfect, but that was what Zach came up with and went forward with.
Through the chair. So my question might be to you, Mark, have you ever seen anyone build something and then tear it down because it's no longer of use?
I haven't in the time that I've been on board, which is only a few years.
Yeah, so to that point, I mean, once a building is up, usually it's there to stay, because people invest a lot of money into erecting it. Why would they go and destroy it? So, that being said, to the rule of the 1/3, if it is an 1,800 square foot, I know what I have at home, and if I wanted another building, I would want it to be functionable, usable. So we must keep that in consideration for our vote.
So,
So I'm comfortable with it as it was recommended by Zach, with the limit of 1,000 square feet or 1/3 of the size of the home.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I really like that you did the 800 square feet by right. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm not as comfortable with the limitation of the no more than 1/3 square footing of the house for a lot of reasons I talked about in the last one. I also noticed too that of all the ones that have been done since 1993, the ones that exceed 1,000 square feet, most of them really exceeded 1,000 square feet. So I guess I'm compelled to think that there's probably a reason. You know, I don't know what it takes to have, you know, an accessory dwelling that's outfitted for somebody with, you know, medical needs or, you know, specialized equipment and so forth. But I'm also very comfortable with allowing it to be a detached unit. So I have discomfort with the square footage and would prefer to eliminate that, putting it forward to town meeting, but.
Muriel actually just took the wind out of my
Oh.
sail. That's exactly what I wanted to say. I think I'm comfortable with the 1,000 square foot limitation. The 1/3 just seems like an arbitrary number, and it could be limiting and could be seen as, you know, adversely affecting certain groups of income versus others. So I feel a little uncomfortable with that. But I guess we always have the option of, you know, going to special permit and going back to zoning advisory, the ZBA for a special permit. So I would be in favor of cutting out the 1/3.
I would kind of keep it in as a guideline. You can always go through a variance and go through the ZBA. If there's a medical need situation that you've identified, that I'm sure that would be something that.
So I just want to, and what I heard Mark say to us too, I want to caution you that the variance process is very challenging, and it really is not so much about your need. Your need is something that you impose onto this. It's really supposed to be like the property can't support something, is that correct?
Yeah, through the chair, I agree, and that's one of the reasons, as I said, why we really wanted to try and take variances out of this to an extent if we could, because there are very compelling situations where we want to give relief, and probably we have given relief, but maybe we shouldn't, because strictly speaking, it wasn't the topography of the land that was at issue, it wasn't the weird shape of the land that was an issue. It was the very compelling situation and the fact that the neighbors were in support or there was no opposition, what have you. So I think the goal of the bylaw should be to try and set guidance, but to do that in a reasonable way so that we have some degree of wiggle room in situations like that. I would agree that larger sizes are going to be difficult to really maintain a defendable variance.
Just through the chair, to parrot on what Muriel's saying is, I mean, I've also encountered in my private practice several circumstances where people want to build an in-law apartment for the mother. And you're right, the topography doesn't affect it, the shape of the lot doesn't affect it. That's not the special circumstance. And the answer I've gotten several times is buy a new house. Move out, sell, go somewhere else. I don't think that's the message that we really want to be sending here. I think family friendly, if I want to build something to accommodate my mother, why not?
Any comments from the public? What I would suggest, because it seems to be If someone makes a motion as proposed, and then if somebody wants to submit an amendment, we can vote on that and then kind of bring it to the vote. And this is to
So
recommend.
I will move it as proposed. I think that's a good approach, John, thank you.
Have a second.
Second.
Okay.
And then I would entertain a friendly amendment.
I'll propose a friendly amendment that we eliminate the 1/3 piece of the size limitation.
Okay.
And I second it.
Second.
Will that be accepted by the?
I totally accept it.
We have a second discussion. We get a,
So, yeah, discussion point, so by eliminating that, in theory, you could have a 1,800 square foot primary, and then propose a 1,600 square foot in-law unit.
1,000.
Thousand.
No, 1,000.
Thousand.
Still limited to 1,000.
Limited to 1,000, so your max is 1,000.
Yes.
Or you could have 1,000 foot home,
Right,
and
and
then you
that's-
should have another 1,000.
If I may, I mean, just, we'd have to look at each individual case, but I would have a hard time seeing how the CBA would find that to be an accessory to the main dwelling. So, I mean, that was the concern, and that was what led to the 1/3. As I said, I wasn't a big fan in the first place, so I think it's something that would just have to be dealt with case by case by CBA.
So for clarification, on the ZBA side of things, and the ZAC side of things, you guys are on the same page with the amended.
well, they can't speak for the whole board, so.
From your
that's not-
perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think they would probably, go with it, I think they look to Mark to a certain degree on this. But-
I don't want to put anybody in a position talking about two separate boards. at one
And I'd be
person.
okay with it.
Okay. So, we have a friendly amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Amendment is carried. So we have an amended recommendation deleting the 1/3. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so carried.
Mark, thank you very much. It's
Thank
really
you.
helpful.
Well, we have 2 minutes.
We can probably do
we have-
marijuana in 2 minutes.
Do we have 2 questions? Because the question is, can we address any of this at the next meeting, or has to be done at this meeting?
Should be done as soon as possible.
Okay. So since it's almost 8 o'clock, can I get,
We vote to open
I
the,
can open and
And
continue
continue.
the public hearing
So
on
moved.
Chamberlain?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so carried.
and then let's go, chop chop.
Okay, so the next item is recreational marijuana. Elaine, can you cover kind of what the town council covered on why it's coming based on all the changes?
So the law has continued to evolve since the May town meeting, and in order to complete the no process, to not allow the uses, need a bylaw adopted. So that's what's proposed. Zach reviewed that and had looked at some language that came from town council and went forward with that.
And I think we discussed a lot of this at the last meeting. Any comments from the?
And there was an email that we distributed that came in today as well on this.
Good evening, I'm Denise Hardwick, Director of Youth and Family Services for the town. I came before the board at the last meeting. I don't have anything really to add except to ask that you move this forward to town meeting. So
We've already approved this to move forward to town meeting, and that was done previously. So this vote is whether we recommend it or not.
Okay, so I'd ask that you recommend that.
Thank you. Well,
No, you just explained, my thoughts were that there was disagreements last time, and my thought was, let's just put it on the ballot and let the town decide, but it sounds like that's,
that we already voted on.
yeah, so I'm good, thank you.
I looked this up in the meantime, and I listened to I rewatched town meeting on HCM, and we discussed this for about 20 minutes as a town meeting last year as a temporary moratorium. And then I myself was surprised to see on the ballot that it became a permanent moratorium, or a permanent ban. And I'm not really sure the public is aware that it's a permanent being proposed, and I don't know if there's any possibility to just extending the temporary moratorium for a year or two, other than the permanent.
The Attorney General has said that they will approve that for a limited period of time, but it's only until there's regulations, so it's really only until perhaps the fall would be the latest.
So I'm
But
just
it's-
gonna read
it's
what was
unworded.
said to us at town meeting last year from the planning board. It said, "This proposes a temporary moratorium, and the planning board and zoning advisory board will draft zoning regulations for the 2018 annual town meeting. And during the same period, the state will develop regulations, there are new uses, we need to do research on parking, dimensional requirements, et cetera." So to me, I think everyone at town meeting thought there would be further discussion, and I'm really surprised that we're moving to a permanent ban.
And I think following that, there was that other vote that was in favor of a permanent ban. And so when it came to Zach, it was felt, well, there isn't support to allow it, so we'll just go ahead with making that permanent.
Okay. Well, I've said what I
Yeah.
want to say.
Could we make an amendment to that as to turning it back into a temporary moratorium?
It would only last
So,
12 months.
Yeah,
So-
Then we'd be,
back with it again.
no,
No,
no. because
whatever the state decides,
Whatever the state decides.
we would, that would be decided for us.
So I would like to make an amendment to it, that it stay a temporary and let the state decide from the state standpoint.
What not to?
What do you mean by that?
By allowing it to go with the word changing that instead of permanent ban, a temporary ban.
Well, it's only a moratorium until the town can adopt regulations.
I understand.
So you either have to adopt a prohibition, or you can allow certain uses, or all of them, but you may want to have them by special permit, you may want to have regulations.
So just one thing to keep in mind, through the chair, one thing to keep in mind is if we were to say that it's a temporary prohibition, and then the state comes out and gives us regulations, and somebody comes forward and opens a facility, I think we would have a really hard time then shutting them down and moving them out after the fact, through zoning. So I think we need to keep that in mind.
And just like any other use, if you decide that you want to allow them, you can repeal the prohibition, and then instead of you can allow them by special permit or some other means later. It's not necessarily permanent, town meeting can change that at any time.
And what if it is, we keep it permanent and then there's objection to that at town meeting?
If
Town votes no.
votes no,
The town meeting votes no. Got
Frank, do you have something to add to it?
Yes, I'm coming at it from a very different angle.
All right, thank you, I appreciate the site.
I just want to say, I mean, this is something that is going to be allowed in the state, and there's going to be facilities, and there's going to be tax revenues that are generated from it. And it's not as though by banning facilities in Hopkinton, that there will be no marijuana in Hopkinton. There will be marijuana in Hopkinton. And I think, well, why are we letting this, why are we letting that tax revenue go?
Right.
Can I make the chair? I don't think we really have all the information we need, but the information we do have, I remember, along with what Amy's saying, is that this was a temporary proposal last year to follow up with what the state was doing. The state pushed it off a bit, and they'll be ready supposedly by this fall with their regulations. And I just think it's just better to go with the state regulations because it passed in the state by overwhelming majority. There is tax implications.
If I can just say one thing, it did not pass in Hopkinton.
I'm getting to that point. And each town, each municipality has the ability to take up temporary measures until the state measures are in place. If they voted majority against it, which is what Hopkinton did. That being the case, it's really not even worth pushing forward anything that's a prohibition, because we have something in place right now that we put in place last year, and I think that putting something new into place is just more negative, regressive kind of politics going on with the medical marijuana is affected as well as recreational marijuana, which is legal in our state. The last thing I'd like to say about this is that if people care about safety and health and they don't want to have marijuana for sale recreationally in town, then they should also not want tobacco and also should not want alcohol. And it's along those same lines. And I thought that those questions were dealt with in the 1920s.
I totally opposite perspective on that. I think the town has voted very clearly here that they want a prohibition. I think Denise made some very good points in terms of the impact of the school. I don't think it sets the right tone and look for what Hopkinton is looking for. And families coming in are not looking to have, you know, a marijuana facility, retail facilities around. So for those reasons, I'm strongly in favor of putting that prohibition in place.
I would concur with everything Frank said. And just a little analogy with what Irfan said. I mean, this is a vice, right? And Frank, you know, that's a different issue, alcohol and cigarettes, and you know, we could agree on that, but we can't do anything about that right now.
Sure.
We're going to do what's in front of us.
There are dry towns, though.
Yep, right. So maybe we do want to go there. Maybe there are people in this town that do want to go there. But as far as Irfan said, the analogy that people are going to have marijuana outside this town, so why don't we take care of the revenue? You can put that in perspective and say the same thing with a casino. It's like there's casinos outside the town, so why don't we just have a casino in Hopkinton? So.
Well, the difference is people aren't, sorry, it was directed at me, so I'm going to reply. The difference is we're not gambling in Hopkinton anyways, whereas marijuana use is occurring in Hopkinton anyways. It's just that the other towns are getting it.
Through the chair, you don't know there's no gambling in
Okay,
Hopkinton.
I think we're rehashing what has
I'll
been
stop.
discussed already. I'll let Muriel have the
I
last
actually,
word. and
I
then
actually
go.
have a new point. Oh my God, I've lost it. Give me 2 seconds. Too much pressure,
Should we go to the
John.
public first? and
Yes,
then
go to
come
the
back?
public
Okay.
first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I
Good
thought I was
Lord.
done, but Ms. Reader Bush's comment
Oh,
is
yes.
exactly what I expressed to Zach also. I would just observe the town's vote at the ballot box was fairly close. The town did vote against, but it was fairly close.
Right.
The town's vote on the temporary moratorium was much more lopsided, but it was pitched as a temporary moratorium at town meeting, although that's not the ballot question that went to the town. So I think there may have been some confusion at the ballot, but that vote, as I understand from town council, is now relevant anyhow, and what controls is this next town meeting vote. Personally, I would ask this board to put this up, as you've already done, without recommendation either way, and let the town vote.
Well, that's
I'm a little conflicted on it too, for all those reasons that it's legal, you know, statewide and so forth. But I do think that we can send the message that we want to send. I know that, for example, when Hopkinton Drug stopped selling cigarettes, it's legal, and you can find cigarettes other places, but I appreciated the message that, you know, a business that was in the business of promoting health was not going to be selling cigarettes. I think that we are not prepared, however, to not have the town vote on this, because we don't have anything in place to regulate the use if we're going to have the use in Hopkinton, right? So I think in the absence of having something structured in place, I almost feel like we're compelled to at least give people a choice.
We've
So
already
that we don't
voted
just.
to put it on, so the question
I know,
now.
I know. I feel kind of compelled that, to recommend it from a planning standpoint, thanks for refining my point, because we don't have anything to fall back on as far as planning for the industry to be, recreational industry to be in Hopkinton. I am comforted to know that it's not the end all and be all if somebody wants to put some energy behind structuring ways that we will support recreational use. That's still in play in the future.
Any new points to be made?
Just to follow up on my recommendation, can we reword it from the permanent, prohibited, from the prohibited? Can we,
Well, we don't have you're looking to make an amendment to something we haven't done yet, and we've already been told that anything that's not permanent, in effect, goes away.
but I don't
2
want to
months
vote
after.
on that
We'll
verbiage.
take,
We're gonna vote that not to recommend it.
Amy?
So I had read, I believe online, that cities that had voted against legalizing marijuana had more flexibility in the regulation of it.
That's
That
right.
we, as the select board or the planning board, could make regulations at any time restricting the zoning, not that it wouldn't require a town meeting vote, is that right? But I don't know if we have time to make those better zoning decisions and have a forum before.
Right, you'd have to have a new public hearing, draft new use
So
regulations.
I really wish we had done that sometime this year, so that we would, that we are not faced with just a ban or not a ban.
Yeah,
And,
very busy then.
You know, I think that's a tough
I have a
situation.
point of clarification.
I agree.
Currently, there is a limit, there's not an ability of a business to sell recreational marijuana in town from the results of our election, our town meeting last year and the election that followed, regardless of the wording. Currently, there are not yet state laws overseeing it, but will be in place hopefully by the fall. If we do not approve this at town meeting, then our current temporary situation continues until the
No.
state law
Until
It
the,
expires,
It expires automatically.
in August.
expires,
August
August.
2018.
even though we voted last year. That's,
Right.
That's,
Yes.
that,
They
that,
voted a
that
date.
vote is
It had a
not
date in it.
thing.
I'm sorry if I'm not clear about that. All right, so if we don't do anything, then there's nothing in place. So what Cliff is proposing is changing prohibit to the more temporary moratorium, continuing that, which is far more acceptable.
But that will go away by state law in August.
Yeah, but we're talking 2 months before the state decides whether or not to. put
Right,
it-
but we don't have, well, let's take it from the public, let's take a motion to put it, and then if you want to do a friendly amendment to change it.
Can I make a suggestion that when you present it on town meeting floor, that you put forth that our temporary prohibition ends in August, and unless we make it a permanent one, we are subject to the rules of the state, and if there is town interest to allow this use, that we take the upcoming year to draft rules that we want to operate by.
That's spectacular.
That's actually what I
idea.
was going to chime in with, is that if we are that concerned about regulating it, why don't we prohibit it? And in the meantime, in the following year, come up with ideas as to how we regulate it and bring that up before the town meeting next year.
So
Can I
more-
if somebody wants to make a motion to, any other comments from the public? Somebody wants to make a motion to recommend at town meeting?
I will make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second,
Okay, any further discussion?
so discussion point, now this is for the prohibition, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Friendly amendment?
We'll let, a friendly amendment?
That we exclude the cultivation sections of this bylaw.
Second,
Second.
discussion?
So I would have to accept the friendly amendment, and I am disinclined to do that only because we don't have regulations in place, but I am very open to that conversation going forward when we are taking it in a more measured and specific and thorough way. So I don't want to shut down the conversation, but I don't think we're prepared for this town meeting to
Well,
support that.
But it is something specifically in our notes today to discuss. And if we need to discuss it more now, we should. I'm not saying don't discuss it, I think we should discuss it more, but now is part and parcel of the,
You know what, in the interest of time, I will accept the friendly amendment.
thank you.
Yep.
Under discussion, I had read an article on Realtor.com, and home prices in Colorado within a half mile of a grow house actually go down 8% because of the smell. So I wouldn't want to allow that in Huntington until we had, a wide buffer zone and clear regulations.
May I also add that town council recommends holding a new public hearing if you're going to allow one of the uses? It wasn't advertised that way.
Okay, so
So I would wait on that if we're going to wait on all of it.
let's take
But I'm very open to
a
having a full
vote on the
conversation.
friendly amendment.
Well, is she accepting the friendly?
I did accept it, in the interest of time, I didn't want to.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Nay. We have vote, so friendly amendment didn't carry. Can we,
So this is as written, we're going to vote for
so
now?
as written, a recommendation?
And just to recommend it, it'll still be on whether we recommend it or
Yes.
not.
Correct. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
So it's a tied and it's a, right?
Doesn't pass at a time?
That's right.
Yes. Okay.
But it will still be on the.
It's on town.
Still gonna be there, it's just not without a recommendation.
Yep.
Okay, and the last item is the lighting. And Elaine, do you want to touch on kind of language changes from council?
I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but I don't think the board has even discussed the concepts
did.
at this
Right.
point, so probably makes sense to talk about it first.
So, since this is really my thing, let me just say that I, in the quick 30 seconds, I would prefer the standalone provision, so that anytime internal lighting became an external feature that was not for, specifically excluding security, safety, backup features that we had talked about, I think that I would like that to be part of a specific process in front of the planning board for sure. I don't want to highlight a business. It does come up because, and everybody knows it does come up because there is a business that has internal lighting that is part of their external design. So that, I think that it is an important conversation to have. I am open to the notion that it may not be this year, but I still would promote the idea of supporting an on-town meeting floor.
I also agree that option one seems like a good way to go.
Yeah, I would support, I would support that, Mira. I do think this does come up, and I think it's something to be cognizant of. Obviously, you can't rewrite the past, but I think going
Right.
forward, it's an element that needs to be vetted, especially for any retail proposal that's in front of this body.
Mhm.
Can everybody hear that? You know.
You can't hear us?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Very difficult to hear you folks. There are motors, fans in the background and service.
Those mics are
Mr. Chairman.
closer to
We
yourself.
didn't know, Bob, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
Don't take it personally.
Yeah.
And the door keeps opening
Yeah.
and there's a lot of mumbling up there. So
Okay.
if you could all speak up,
Okay, we will do that.
that would be great. Thank you.
Scott, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Scott Richardson, President of the Hopkinton Chamber of Commerce. Speaking on behalf of the chamber, and actually I sit on Zach as well, but I'm wearing my chamber hat right now. We would suggest that this is a very slippery slope to enact something that talks about interior lighting being not in good taste or distracting, because I would suggest that every single building has interior lighting that somebody could arbitrarily make that argument. So we are very much opposed to any regulation that regulates any interior lighting other than obviously having something done that is really obnoxious and irritating, especially if it's adjacent to a residential neighbor. I think the zoning review process, the site plan review process addresses site lighting adequately, gets good input from the neighbors, and usually if there's any distress caused by any site lighting, it is usually brought to the attention of the property owner, and there's usually improvements and adjustments done in that respect. So again, we are really very opposed to anything that regulates interior lighting, because you're basically going to start talking about every single building in town.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, it isn't our intention to do that, but your objections are noted and respected, Scott. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
I have a comment. And I grew up in Saugus, and there's a store called Sozio, and they had the big lights, and they'd shine up in the sky, and they'd have sales every weekend, and it was cool looking for those lights on the weekends. It's not so good for stargazers, but that was the 1970s, and currently what we're talking about is interior lighting that is exterior purposes. So it's part of the display from inside, which we have no coverage on that, nothing to follow in any of our bylaws, which is why Zach came up with this. It's true, the one instance that this exists right now, they were amiable to working with the neighbors and they're fine, but going forward, it's just nice to have something to point at and say, look, this is a regulation that we have if we adopt it, and this is how we like to move forward. We have rules about signs and rules about lights, but not rules about interior lights that shine out.
Question, maybe Muriel, this is more clarification. What about during the holidays? If somebody were to have,
Yeah, I remember that discussion coming up at Zach, and, like Weston Nurseries has a big holiday display and things like that. So I think that that's a fair question and a conversation, and I think that, it isn't the intention of this bylaw, but we should be specific about that. So I appreciate that feedback. I think that if this is on the warrant, and if we do recommend it, I think that we should particularly be careful to make sure that we're clear about what we're not including, like security lights or temporary holiday decorations. It presents a real challenge, I agree, though. It's a conversation.
can we modify that?
Yes.
If we vote on it now and then be able
Yes.
to?
Yep.
Okay. Something to consider, I just.
Absolutely.
This is the point where we miss Claire Wright's input, because she could discuss lumens and get down to the nitty gritty.
Maybe she'll help us on town meeting floor.
Maybe.
Any other comments from the board? Any other comments from the public? Can we get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Could I just ask a question? Did you want to include prohibiting the holiday lights and allowing the holiday lights? and
Yeah,
the
now,
security
I think
lights?
we
Yeah.
should,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, we can ask town council to.
Thank you. I'm also gonna, we should vote, but I also wanted to say one more thing. I'm just gonna, we're going to that Holy Cross conference. I'm gonna ask a couple people about it as well when we're there, experts in the field.
So we have a motion, kind of as amended, proposed as amended. Going to take a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained, so carried.
Thanks. And Frank, you said it came forward from Zach. It really didn't. Zach didn't bring this forward. This is coming from us, just
Not that.
not Zach, as it happens this time.
Okay.
Oh, can I know we're running behind time. Can I ask for a future agenda item to talk about how we're gonna structure Zach going forward, and maybe even some things that we might want them to focus on, like marijuana?
Now, do we want to take a 5-minute break now, or start the hearing?
Yeah, 5-minute break.
5-minute break.
5-minute break. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and at 8:30, we will continue the public hearing.
The magic
Shingle Street
begins.
And Wayland Road subdivision.
Is it 5 minutes? Okay.
Okay, we've got everyone back. Can I get a motion to reopen the public hearing? So moved. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the continuance of the public hearing, Chamberlain Street and Whalen Road subdivision, Ms. Kramer.
Yes, thank you all. I just want to clarify, for the subdivision vote, we need a simple majority for folks, not the supermajority. We do have one missing member, and she won't be a voter going forward because she's missed two. And a couple pieces are the supermajority vote, but the subdivision vote is a simple majority. Okay, so we are on the agenda. I noticed too late for tonight that we didn't really start with the overview of the site from the planning department, but we're gonna feed that into the wrap up, hopefully, the next time we meet. I think we're gonna make good progress tonight.
Yes.
And we will get that piece. So we will start with the detailed discussion on the road and lot layout design, and including the emergency access, which I think we have some good feedback information on. So take it away for us from there.
So as we presented in the overview, from a road design perspective, we are proposing to extend the Whalen Road and Chamberlain Road dead ends and connecting those through a gated emergency access. We're also proposing to widen Chamberlain Street from the point of Center Trail down to what is now referred to as the unimproved section of Chamberlain, as well as the unimproved section of Chamberlain that will now lead into the development. So that encompasses the scope of what we're talking about from the road perspective and access there. We had submitted the original site plan and prepared in preparation for tonight's meeting some alternate exhibits and options based on some informal feedback that we had received from conservation as well as the fire department. So wanted to have those ready to present to you with a visual, which has a slightly reduced pavement area on the emergency access connector over the wetlands. And
Okay, perfect.
Okay?
Yep.
So if you want us to walk through it in any more detail, like drive into the photos, happy to do that.
Perfect.
We'll take
I think that's a good idea.
Sure. I'll spend 5 minutes just giving you first a high-level overview, and then again, we have a few exhibits to walk you through, just to give you the flavor of the roadway layout and a few of the details. The map that's before you is at a scale of 1 inch equals 100 feet. You see the north arrow there in the upper left, so north is essentially to the upper left of the page. The site is 103 acres, and just to the left here, to the north, you'll see the cul-de-sac of Whalen,
Yep.
and of course, the existing Chamberlain Street right-of-way is in this location. So we have two dead-end segments connected by emergency access, two roadway segments that terminate in the cul-de-sac. The first of which is about 2,200 feet, and that's from this point to its terminus here. And the Whalen extension is from its existing cul-de-sac here to the terminus in this location. That's about 1,300 linear feet. Both roadways are 22 feet curb to curb with bituminous curbing. There's a grass strip and a 5-foot sidewalk on both sides of the entire network that you see. There's a connector here. The alignment of this connector has changed slightly, and I'm going to show you that in the next exhibit. That's about 450 feet in length, and there is a wetland crossing associated with that. So we're talking about some box culverts. It's an elevated crossing, guardrails on both sides, curbed and paved. And again, I'll get into the details of that. I'll also show you some details of the widening of Chamberlain Street. As you recall, we walked the site on, I believe, February the 3rd, and we viewed stone walls, existing trees to be impacted, trees to be saved, where we intended to increase the width of the roadway, et cetera. So this gives you the lay of the land. What I'm going to do is start up in this portion of Chamberlain right here. And as you may recall in the field, it was a little bit difficult to read the plans at this scale. And so we were asked to add some color, and I think it helps. I'm not sure how easily you can read that in your small packets. But we did add some color. The red lines on the plan represent the existing right-of-way that varies in width. The green lines represent the proposed edge of pavement, and the blue, the existing edge of pavement. So the widening ranges in width from 18 to 20 feet. It starts just to the east of the existing center trail, which is right here. So that's the center
sorry.
trail.
I don't see any colors on any of these.
It may have been the version you have are reduced in black and white.
I think what you're talking about, there's color.
There is some color up there. There's
Like-
color on this map.
You're in the packet.
Yeah,
In
on the
color.
computer. I'm desperately trying to get to the color one on the computer.
42.
Thank you.
And we would have given you bigger scale plans, but the problem with that is you would need so many of them
Yeah.
strung together, so we tried to pick a scale that worked best.
All right, thanks, Amy, for your pages. Oh.
I'm not getting my page number.
46.
I really zoom in to see the color.
Oh, can you see the color on the screen?
Can I overrule? Because I messed mine up. Thank you very much. It's easy on the screen.
It definitely helps, that.
Can you run the colors again for me one more time?
Sure, the red is the existing right-of-way.
Yep.
Which varies in width. The blue is the existing edge of pavement, and
Yep.
the green is the proposed edge of pavement.
Okay.
The blue is the existing,
Let me just make sure I have my colors right. Yep, the blue is the existing.
So I think for our purposes, for the public, you're not necessarily going to the right-of-way when you don't have to in order to not be less disruptive on the street.
That's correct. What we have is a series of constraints, if you will. We have mature trees in some areas.
Yeah.
We have stone walls that we're trying to preserve.
Yeah.
We have utility poles, mailboxes, all the typical elements you would find on a road such as this. So we're trying to balance all of those constraints. So what we set out to do was widen the roadway wherever possible to 20 feet minimum.
Yep.
Well, wherever possible, of course. And then there are a few areas, as a result of, again, saving mature trees, in some cases, 150-year-old white oaks, things of that nature, very significant landscape features. We neck down to a minimum of 18 feet.
Okay.
So, and it's not a very straight alignment. We did sort of meander the alignment, not so abruptly so you would sort of feel that when you're driving, but in a very subtle way. But again, to allow us to avoid those elements that are worthy of saving.
I do appreciate that comment, and I'm not being argumentative, but it's not gonna feel to people if they drive down that street that it's particularly meandering, just because of the way the street has been laid out. But yes, your changes are looking to soften that.
Right,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
So again, the widening activity starts just east of Center Trail, which is right here. And again, I know it's difficult to see at this scale. Hopefully you can follow along with me on your version. This is a continuation, same orientation and scale, and then this is exactly where the improved section of Chamberlain Street ends, at that 90-degree corner.
For those of us who are living on.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm
I'll take,
sorry.
I will definitely take comments, and when we do have them, you have to go up to the microphone.
All right.
Go ahead.
Sure. So the improved section that is currently improved is about 880 feet. That's from the center trail to this point. And then there's a second portion from the corner to the site, which is just off the page here. That's another about 410 linear feet. That is the unimproved section. So essentially, there's just a cart road there today, lined with stone walls and trees. Along that section, we do have some impacted trees, but we made an effort to save trees there as well. we had a consistent 20-foot wide curb-to-curb roadway for that 410 feet. A couple other things to point out when we were in the field. In this location, there's a driveway to the Tedstone property that's essentially right off the end of this curve.
Yep.
So what we discussed, there's a blow-up here in the upper right. Difficult to see, but the existing edge of pavement is here and here. What we have agreed to do is to shift the driveway to the shaded location. That allows the stone wall to be extended and evergreen plantings to be placed here. And what that does for the Tedstone residents is to mitigate headlights. As cars come down the road, their headlights will hit this evergreen screen versus the front window of their home.
Have you run this by the homeowners there?
We
Yeah,
discussed it in the
okay.
field and we.
Yeah, I knew we had
talked.
talked about it on the sidewalk, but,
Yeah.
okay.
They did see it before the meeting this evening.
Perfect.
And we're happy to make minor adjustments as, you know, they
Understood.
see fit.
Awesome.
But I think the concept is pretty solid. Any questions with respect to the widening? Again, I know we walked it and we looked at all the trees in length. There were a few trees that did not fall on the original plan or were not survey located. I think most of them were dead, so we assumed that they did not need to be located. We were told otherwise in the field, so we did locate those trees and add those to the plan.
Okay.
We also quantified a small amount of stone wall that would be impacted, primarily where utility poles need to be relocated. We have a total of 6 utility poles that will need to be relocated as part of the widening project. There's some temporary impact to stone wall, small sections of stone wall. What we would propose is to just stockpile that stone wall section, move the pole, and by hand place it in its, approximately in its original condition. So we have made attempts to minimize impacts wherever possible.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we were on a site walk. I thought I heard that talking about the utility poles, that they were gonna be undergrounded for the 3 or 4 poles.
I think somebody may have suggested that, but that's not the plan.
In the
for it.
new area is gonna be is it underground?
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Wherever the unimproved section and then into the site, throughout the site.
Yes.
Power will be underground. But there's just no room within that right of way to install utilities underground.
There's no room.
That would entail underground transformers and vaults and things of that nature. It's too much for this very narrow right of way.
Okay. Okay.
Any questions with respect to the widening?
Anybody
Just a
else?
follow-up
Yep.
question to that. So there's room for a road, but not room for underground cables?
There's room for a very small amount of widening, but when you talk about putting power underground, it's not just a cable. It involves transformers that are underground. They have to be in vaults that meet the power provider standards.
But they go under the road, correct?
They typically do not. They typically would go in the shoulder of the road.
No, Legacy North Farm, the state required us to put them right down the middle of the road and in cement. So I would question whether there's room. I mean, if you don't want to do it for a different reason, I would question, that's fine, but I would question whether you can do it or
Sure.
not.
To your point, it's not proposed. It's
Right,
proposed to
that's fine,
relocate
that's
them. But I would suggest to you that there are significant challenges associated with doing that in this narrow right of way.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll continue on.
I'm sorry, on that last map, can you just show where the developer's land begins on the northern side of the map?
Where the development, sorry?
Where the cart path goes?
Oh, where the unimproved
Yeah,
section?
I think it'd be useful to show where that begins and where the private property ends.
So this is the third exhibit that we sent. It's essentially a continuation of the sheet
Sure, yeah,
I
okay.
just showed you. So here's the corner. And then you can see as the roadway turns, that's right where it enters the private site.
Mhm.
That match line is here. So you can see that first curve onto the private site.
So at that point, he owns both sides.
That's correct. He owns essentially all the property. Here, the property line is right here, where that roadway crosses onto the private property.
So for point of clarification, there are no abutters, that's his right of way, his property.
Yes, from this property line to the left on the map.
Thank you.
leave that up there in case we need to jump back to it. So we talked briefly about the emergency access road. As originally submitted, it was just under 450 feet in length. We have since changed the alignment of that emergency access to respond better to the latest wetland flags that were hung in the field. Difficult to see on this map, but the previous plan showed a single box culvert about 15 feet in length along the roadway. We have a significantly wider crossing now with this latest flagging. So we have two box culverts that measure 25 feet in length. They butt together, so we have a 50-foot crossing that's from here to here. And what we have done, based on preliminary input, as Kathy mentioned, we have a pavement width of 16 feet where it crosses the resource area, and it will flare out. It shows as 18 here, it will be 20 feet. So 16 from roughly this location to here, and it will transition to a 20-foot width. That's the current design. And that box culvert has wing walls associated with it to minimize impact to the resource area. There's a 2-to-1 off-graded slope within the resource area. That flattens to a 3-to-1 slope beyond the resource area. Again, that's curbed. There's drainage components that you see here. So essentially this flows from its high point. It's curbed. It's picked up in catch basins. It's piped into the drainage system. It is gated. You see the gates on both ends of the emergency access. That covers the roadway
Okay.
network. There's a line item for lots. I can talk briefly about the lots.
I think, I really think we want to talk about the roadway first.
Okay,
Get
sure.
that, but thank you. Phil, do you have some comments specifically on the roadway and the?
So, for the record, Phil Paradis of SADA, we've been reviewing this for now. So your regulations, so generally, within the project limits, they meet the requirements. So really the comments are the relative to the emergency access road and then the off-site improvements that are. So your subdivision regulations classify roads as rural, minor, major, and whatever. So rural is for roads up to 10 homes. So and that's a minimum width of 20 feet. For minor streets from 10 to 50 feet, 10 to 50 homes, the minimum width is 22 feet. So within the, like I said, within the subdivision, they're showing 22 feet wide, which is consistent with a minor road. Outside of that, however, they're showing improvements to Chamberlain, up to 18 feet wide, and then the extension at 20 feet wide.
Yeah.
So that doesn't meet your regulations. However, after working in Hopkinton for some time, there are many roads that don't meet that minimum requirement. So when it comes to the proposed improvements on Chamberlain,
Can I use that? Yeah, I'll do that for you.
Yeah. So the plans will, they're proposing to save trees and walls and all that, and I applaud them for that. And if I were living on the street, I'd like to have that too. The challenge with that is relative to safety. Because if you keep jogging the road back and forth and you have a tree, you're going around a tree, and there's a few sections where the road jogs kind of abruptly, you're effectively gonna have less than the full 18 feet. You're gonna be, unless the car turns abruptly with the road. So that I would caution you on, there's a section right here. So I can see that the reason why you want to save this tree, okay? But just past the tree, and the driveway, it comes in, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet, so you can get the width back. So when you're driving this way, when you're driving toward, I don't know if you can see that, but when you're driving this way, you see a wider road here, then all of a sudden it necks down. If someone's coming the other way, and that's at the same time, it's gonna seem like that they're riding in my lane. So I think you gotta look at this a little bit more closely to see how, when cars are gonna pass, how that's gonna do. So maybe some analysis on paths, travel paths and stuff like that.
Can I ask a question here, and I don't want to take you off your, what you want to share with us, but would it make sense for that to be, we have had some specific requests for traffic calming measures, because it is a straight shot, and we will be adding traffic. Would that make sense to intentionally put a table to calm traffic at that point, so people see it more clearly, that they have to slow down in that spot?
I think that may be an alternative to consider, to make sure that you are keeping the speeds down and you know,
Okay.
and you'd have to look at how it works.
Okay.
I think you gotta be careful when you're going by a tree that's right at the edge of the road.
Yep.
You're not gonna ride at the edge of the road, you're gonna be a couple feet at
Oh, I do
least.
Fruit Street all the time, so
Right,
that's a
right.
whole.
So typically, we don't allow street trees, even in, you know, planted islands, to be closer than 2 feet from the edge of the road. So it's both for the health of the tree and for the health of your car. So you gotta be careful when we're trying to meander through and save things. It might be a great idea. I think you might be able to, I wanna say, move walls so that, you know, they look like they've been there forever, but they're slightly moved, to get the safety, things.
Okay.
Uh,
I would,
Yeah, fine.
to Phil's point and to your questioning, as far as Phil's point about the trees, I am confronted now with trees on my property that I'm presently going into. And the arborists that I speak with talk about the disturbance of the root system or the gravel that the root system is in. And when you put in a road that disturbs the root system, that tree's life expectancy is nearly 2/3 wiped out. Over a short period of time, the tree will stop to grow. And then it's gonna die anyway. It's not factual that it will die in that less than 2/3 of the time, but it has significant impact on the way the tree goes from that point on. So when we're talking about an area like that, that has a tree right on the edge of the road, and even along the whole thing, to impact the root systems of those trees are gonna come down sooner than later. And I just want you all to know about that going forward, is that those trees are not gonna stay there.
So I think that it brings up a good point, that when we are talking about the individual trees, we probably need some expert advice on the best way to work with the trees and with what you want to design.
Can I briefly address that, please?
You can?
I think what you said is absolutely true. When you have a new construction situation, these trees have existed next to this pavement for years and years.
Right.
So we're not proposing any changes at that interface. It's mostly on the other side where we hold the point next to the tree and we widen on the other side of the road where the tree doesn't exist.
But you're still gonna take up the top coat of what's there and resurface it.
We proposed only to widen where we need to widen.
So how does that work? I mean, how do you propose a road to be regraded and reestablished?
It's
With-
called, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Without disturbance of the subsoil underneath the road itself?
So again, where we're widening is typically away from the trees. We could do a box widening there. That entails some excavation, but again, it's not immediately adjacent to the trees. Where the roadway is currently up against the tree, we're not impacting that. We're not changing, we're not regrading the roadway.
Well, how can you do that? that road is inferior to the new surface that you're putting on. It won't last.
Well, I mean, that's another, we're talking about two different
Yeah,
things here, but.
We'll get to
Okay,
that.
all right.
Yeah.
If there is if we're in a situation where we're milling and overlaying, we're not interrupting the gravel base of the roadway. We're not proposing to excavate beneath the road surface. And as the plan is constituted right now, again, we're just doing strip widening where needed.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that up.
Fran?
A point for Phil. Are there other pinch points? I think you've identified the one pinch point there. Is that the only one we're talking about, Phil, here, or are there other pinch points that you've identified?
I think that's the major one. I mean, again, you got trees right on the edge of the road, and you're trying to, this is 18 feet here.
I believe there are 3 different locations where we net to 18.
But you may not have as big a tree, right, making it sort of the obvious pinch in all of the spots.
Right. And I assume those trees are gonna continue to grow.
Let's hope. That's our hope.
Question about
So they're
trees?
gonna,
Can we just let him finish and then, yes? Did you have, I interrupted you and then we started with questions and I apologize.
right. So another issue is this bend.
Yeah.
You know, your regulations require a minimum of 150-foot radius. Now, that obviously is not gonna be 150, so I think there's gotta be some, to make sure that people that have just wandered on the road and are riding down the street, all of a sudden they see, a row of tree, whatever.
Arborvitae, evergreen.
Evergreens, they don't see where the road goes. So I think there's gotta be some signage, a little bit of signage, make sure to, protect, the neighbors from having to go right through
Just a
your.
real quick question related to that.
Sure.
Would that need a variance?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
The
Sorry,
width
so it's
would-
another waiver, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Waiver, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Waiver, I think we're less concerned about this section, a consistent section. There's no driveways, there's not, people will be able to see a little bit further, and, there's less confusion for the, anyway, that, relative to that.
Okay.
So I think our concern is just making sure, people aren't freaked out by someone coming the other way, and there's a tree, and there's a wall, and, and also just, I would recommend that you run this by DPW, because plowing the street that's irregularly, this is gonna be a challenge as well. And putting snow up against a tree or a wall or something.
I'm sure they're familiar with the challenge there, but that's a very good point
Right,
as
right.
we're designing, yeah. Okay. Anything else, Phil?
I don't know if you wanna talk about sidewalk or.
Yeah,
Raise that up
absolutely. Yeah, you
later.
can absolutely throw that in with this. Did you have a question on where we were?
Question about this point about the 150-foot radius.
Yep.
I swear we had saw that there was a 150-foot radius with the previous design with the way the driveway was. Is that not the case now because the driveway changed at the end, Mrs. Tedstone's driveway?
The
Or-
driveway itself, if I could, the driveway itself changed, as
Yes.
I pointed out here,
Yeah,
but the roadway alignment has not.
okay. I thought I saw a radius presented to us at some point.
What you may be referring to is the edge of gravel is sort of a very tight corner, so what we did is we smoothed it as much as we could, and we added a radius as big as we could, as the right-of-way would accommodate, if you will. But we're still less than 150 feet.
Thank you.
And signage is certainly not a problem.
Okay.
I think that's a
Yeah.
good suggestion.
Yep. Go ahead, Phil.
So again, relative to the subdivision, the plans indicate a sidewalk on one side of the road, except for the extension and the upgrades along this section of road. Now, I don't know if the plan stays this way, we're not expecting a lot of traffic, it's probably less of an issue. But, pedestrians will have to walk on the road.
So there is definitely active discussion because it is fairly close and connected to the schools. So we expect that we will have school-age children routinely using that stretch. So we're hoping, or we talked about at the site walk, possibilities of some sort of hybrid solution where we don't necessarily put in a sidewalk, but we extend a trail and make sure that there is a safe walkability on the adjacent property if that's possible,
Yeah,
kind of thing.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Anybody on the board have questions on the,
Tree question.
on the roadway? But yes, I will get that.
Just, do we know the number of utility poles that'll be being moved?
I believe it's 6.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
On the walk, we were part of that discussion was with dead trees, dying trees, and then you did include them, but they're not marked which ones you suspect may not be healthy or not. So when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking of like one of the properties, all 4 trees in front of it are marked to be removed. One is marked distressed, I'm sorry, 2 is marked distressed, but all 4 are marked to be removed. That's different than I remember from the walk. So is that, they're all on the southern side, is that just, I'm not even sure what my question is, I'm just like, it seems different from the walk.
Well, again, the plan looks slightly different because we were missing some trees.
Yeah.
So we added those, but we have not revised the alignment of the proposed road. So if a tree was slated for removal, that has not changed. There may be a couple that have been infilled.
I think what you might be asking is, we have identified on the plan by tree which one was stressed or dying or dead, but still standing. So in that clump you're talking about, I think it was 1 or 2, as noted on the plan, are stressed and dying. The other ones are living, but they're all proposed to be removed. In the summary that I had sent with for the scenic road public hearing, we had detailed, I
Yeah.
summarized
All the types of
these,
trees.
and then
Yeah.
that was to correspond with the plan, tree by tree.
So we are gonna get to the scenic road trees, it's down there, and I guess I would propose to the board not to discuss right now, but to contemplate a consultant in to help us identify what's going on with all those trees from our perspective. Yeah. Well, we don't really have a tree warden, so we might really, so we'll get there, but before we leave tonight, we should at least know if we want one, so we get that underway. I know that, I just want to reiterate that I know from the residents that it's very important to them that smaller roadway is protected as a smaller emergency access way. I appreciate that so much attention has been paid to that. Sort of the key interest point from residents is the increase in traffic on either side in those previously really quiet neighborhoods. Is there plans to sort of permanently conservation restrict up to the edges to help assure the residents that it'll stay that way? I don't know what the feedback is you got from Concom too.
Within the right-of-way you're referring to?
The emergency access way.
Oh, okay. I'm
Right,
sorry.
the open space that abuts it.
So the emergency access itself is located within the open space area A.
Yes.
So it is in fact in the open space. Originally, we contemplated that being in an easement, but it was discussed that that probably wasn't necessary. The open space would ultimately be owned by the town, so the easement wouldn't be
So
necessary.
it's nothing,
open.
it's nothing to you guys that we could put a CR on there if we
Correct.
wanted to, et cetera.
Yes.
Okay.
It's part of the open
Yep.
space.
It can be
Yep.
permanently protected.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Yes.
I thought previously it was going to be a 20-foot wide emergency access, but is it Concom that suggested it
Yeah.
switch to 16 feet?
To limit the impact?
Yes.
That came out of
That's the
Concom?
idea.
From
And
Conservation
it's,
Commission?
and it's 16 only over the wetland areas.
And
To
it
bring that-
graduates out to 20, right,
Correct.
at the end?
It's a subtle graduation.
So what did you say, was it 25 or 50 feet that it's so 16 feet wide?
It's 16 feet. I don't have the lengths. It's probably about 150, 175 feet.
Okay, okay.
Of the
I
450.
don't know where I got that number. Okay, all right.
And the fire chief had though expressed that if it was going to be connected, that it had to be a 20-foot. I don't know if he had waited on this yet, or
I certainly don't want to speak for the fire department, but our understanding is informally that some preliminary direction was discussed and given by the fire department. Again, I'm not speaking for them.
We should double check. Is the fire department here by any chance? Oh.
We have Mira.
Hey, I'm hiding. Why are you hiding back there? So are you aware of the 16-foot for that stretch?
Yes, we are.
And what are your thoughts?
We're okay with that.
Okay.
That will work for us because of the wetlands. We've
Perfect.
had a nice educational
You guys are doing an amazing job getting to boards, and
informal meeting with
I really
the
appreciate that.
So we understand their concerns, they understand our concerns, so we'll work with them on it, absolutely.
I so appreciate that. Okay, thank you. Is everybody on the board okay for now? I'm gonna just see if, I know I have oh, yes.
I have one question on
Yes.
the gate, on the emergency gate. How does that actually work? Is this like, you have a fast pass that you're gonna hand out to all our
The DPW.
DPW, and I mean, how does that work? Is there a plan for when we lose power? Hypothetically speaking tonight, is there a plan for, how the power's gonna get through if power goes out and?
I think what we have done to date on the plans is to defer to the specifications of the fire department, whatever their desire is.
Okay.
In terms of the locking mechanism and the gate design itself, we're happy to incorporate that.
We proposed it really high level as either a sliding or a swing gate to be electronically operated. The idea being through, we'll make it similar to like a garage door opener or other, whatever is suggested to us.
Similar sophisticated mechanism.
Right, exactly. That would be available to the fire department as well as DPW for plowing and access that way. In the event of a power failure, there are manual, like a Knox box or something on that idea, where there can be a key, so in that, there's a manual way to open it, should there be no power to it.
I would think also that garage door openers have a backup battery, so same kind of thing, I would imagine with that. That's part of what's out.
Being sadly without a garage, I am not familiar with garage door openers.
Power gate, so I'm not even sure that we're at that point yet.
But we have a working conversation going with the fire department to make sure that they are satisfied with whatever that. And then the other piece obviously is the DPW. Have you also talked to them about the gate mechanisms and so forth?
We've proposed something back, Paul's had some informal discussions with John
Okay, so that's in
Westerling.
process.
We responded back to the comments that he submitted previously,
Mhm.
kind of basically the same thing that we said today.
Yeah.
But again, we are open to whatever design elements are,
Okay.
critical to the success of the gate.
Critical to the success of this gate. Okay, fair enough, thank you. Yes.
Hi, Gary Trendle, 31 Chamberlain Street. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is for Beta Group, and when you talk about safety, are you talking about vehicle safety, pedestrian safety, both, or what do you mean by safety?
I was primarily discussing vehicle safety, and I think there's going to be discussion in terms of pedestrian acts as well.
Okay, so pedestrian safety will be a different conversation than what we just talked about? Or?
Well, for me on the roadway, I'm thinking about safety all around,
Yeah.
for pedestrian and bikes and neighbors and so forth. So, I mean, if you have a specific question about, I think this is the time to
Okay.
bring up
So
that.
I guess my question is, then, I guess, have you looked at pedestrian or bicycle safety on Chamberlain Street?
We did not. We recommend a sidewalk be provided, which is standard with the regulations.
Okay. And then my second question, I think you mentioned there's 3 pinch points on the existing improved section of Chamberlain Street. And those pinch points, what are those limited by? Those trees or walls?
Mostly
or
trees,
what's-
trees and walls.
Trees and walls?
Yes.
I think
So-
in one case it's water, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Is the brook one, it has to be
The wetland in
the,
one area does come close,
Pinch point?
but it's primarily the trees and the walls that are
Okay,
driving
so then
that.
you will be extending the pavement towards those trees. Those trees are the pinch points, and the road is not 18 feet now, then the pavement's gonna be extending to the base of the tree, is that?
No,
correct?
the pavement in most cases, I believe in all cases, is very close to the base of the tree now, so we would extend it on the opposite side of the road. And that's what gives you that slight meandering effect.
Okay, I guess I remember during the sidewalk, there was, I thought, 1 or 2 situations where the pavement was being extended closer to the trees, but.
I'm not telling you that it could be an area where it's 6 inches, based on the constraint on the other side of the roads, but generally speaking, we're doing our best to stay as far away from the trees as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
okay. So are we ready, do we think, to move on from this spot? I feel like we've satisfied this one? Okay. Oh, traffic, this is my favorite. Take it away with traffic.
Well, our traffic consultant wasn't able to be here tonight,
Huh?
but overall, the traffic study that we submitted and presented and has been reviewed by Beta was in support of the emergency access road, obviously. And the overall findings were that with that design, there were not necessarily any significant impacts to the current intersection, roadway volume, et cetera. The recommendations that came out were primarily on widening Chamberlain, as we just discussed, to support the additional trips that may result into the new development, and their recommendation was widening it where we could up to the 20 feet, so we've gone through that and discussed that. There were just a couple of other items that they had recommended, nothing that was that critical, sorry. And then, I'll let Beta speak to it.
I'm okay moving right to Beta if you want.
Yeah.
It's totally fine.
It really was,
Yeah.
the Chamberlain Street widening was the one thing that came out of the study that was an action point. Everything else, the sight lines, we could adhere to, and then the other item was signs and pavement markings on the Wayland Road approach, just to replace those, so.
On the Wayland Road
On the Wayland
approach.
Road approach, where it's the stop line pavement
Okay,
markings, where it
okay,
goes
I gotcha.
into Main Street, where West
Mhm.
Main Street is not
Okay.
activated.
Phil, are you prepared to speak to traffic? I mean, yeah, traffic.
No, we don't have any additional comments.
No additional issues? Okay.
Mike,
Okay.
Mike was here to discuss if there were other options proposed.
Okay. The only thing that I wanted to ask about was, in particular myself, is traffic calming measures and the pedestrian bicycle safety. Just to gauge openness, I presume that you would be open to calming measures that the residents on either street are interested in, that you connect to. I'm thinking in particular with Chamberlain, but Wayland may have some issues too. I know that they have a bigger, more quote-unquote improved street to work with.
Of course, we'd be open to any of that, and can pursue some design of any elements.
Okay. Anybody up here? Traffic? Traffic in general?
In general, I'm a little concerned still, just as a point of reference, the Board of Selectmen sets the speed limits for the streets, not the planning board.
The planning board does not set speed limits.
But I have a general idea that speed limit through this section of Chamberlain on the western side, before the old cart path, speed limit's generally 15 miles an hour. And one of the concerns I'm hearing, and I share, is that with the added traffic coming from further west, people may not drive that slowly. And when we're talking about bikes and people walking along the street, that's an issue. And I don't see anything yet that really covers that.
So this is an appropriate time to ask, who does speed limits?
There's a body of law and regulation on speed limits, and some of it depends on a speed study.
Oh, boy. What is the marked speed limit on those two streets?
I didn't see any.
20 on Chamberlain, the entire length of Chamberlain is 20? So we wouldn't be advocating to change that. How about Wayland?
West,
Is
slow.
Wayland just 25 because it's
Standard?
standard? Do we know?
It's not marked.
We certainly wouldn't be advocating for raising any speed limits. Okay.
Certainly not. To speak to that point, at last year at town meeting, I think the standard speed limit marked or unmarked was 25 for unmarked.
There was no
streets.
change.
No change?
No change.
Keeping it 25.
There was no change to what the town had done for years.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi.
Amanda Fauché, 39 Chamberlain, co-chair of the Chamberlain-Wayland Neighborhood Coalition. Just a comment on the traffic calming idea. The meandering road, where it would be a little bit narrower, would, I think, naturally make people go slower. Because driving on Fruit Street or parts of Lumber Street, it's very windy already, if you have to go slow. So if the road is already a little narrower and windy, I think that would make people naturally go a little bit slower. Just a comment on that.
Thank you. Mr. Totino.
Totino, 17 Wayland Road. Are we going to be talking about each of these sub-bullets under traffic now, or do you want comments on all of them at this point?
So I would take comments on any of them, because I think that, so it's a little tricky, because I think that we did talk a lot about traffic, but not necessarily in this hearing. So if anybody has any comments or concerns about traffic, this is the time.
Okay, 2 comments, I have a questions. 1, regarding Wayland Road, where the current cul-de-sac is.
Yep.
Would it be possible to turn that into a rotary or put some kind of traffic guide on there? Because you're going to have Wayland Road, the new road, and Bragg Drive all coming together right at that point. It seems to me some physical way of sort of
Organizing.
forcing people to slow down or stop, because you can have those 3 items merging.
That's a question.
We did look at that.
Yeah.
And I believe the way it was presented to me was perhaps a center island that you sometimes see on cul-de-sacs. So we analyzed the existing geometry to see if we could place an island. We couldn't get an emergency vehicle to make that turn. So we thought it would be best to keep that cul-de-sac geometry as it is, so an emergency vehicle could turn around there versus having to go into the site to turn around at the future cul-de-sac. So again, we tried to site a center island just as a traffic calming measure, but it just didn't work. We would have to actually expand the entire cul-de-sac to do that. There are wetland resource areas there that would be impacted. There are existing driveways that connect to the existing edge of pavement. We would certainly be willing to explore other ideas, but that one in particular does not seem to work.
All right, I do think that Mr. Totino brings up a good point, though, that there has to be some mechanism of controlling the development's traffic when it lands onto Wayland there. So I think that I would be very open to some additional thought on that.
I have a thought. We have our regulations and bylaws that cover that, where you can extend them. And we're talking about extending them, and he has a very good point. If we're talking about extending them, what are you going to do about it?
Yes, Dave.
Question about process, are we gonna go through each of these bullet items within traffic?
So I think that we can, or I'm looking at them in their totality. So however you want to do it. I would not hold back.
So just help me out with the overall process here. Will we get another shot at these, or is this a?
We always get another shot at it, but if you want to, if we, so we did try, I can, I'll list them one by one, and that'll just be
Okay,
clear.
yeah, it might be easier.
Yeah,
Thank
that'll
you.
just be clear, yeah. Phil?
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about all of them, because I wanted to
Yes, you,
comment about sidewalks.
go ahead.
So I know there's been talk about sidewalks and how to handle it on traffic, pedestrian traffic on Chamberlain. On Wayland Road, we have a lot of families now. There's 2 types of families, basically. Families with a lot of kids, and then families with retirees, okay? In both cases, they walk up and down the street now. Now, we're gonna have a lot of traffic. It would be really nice to have a sidewalk just on one side, so people could walk on the sidewalk. And then it would connect, the sidewalks on West Main Street that go from the center of town to Lumber Street. There's gonna be sidewalks in this new development. If you put sidewalks on Wayland Road, it would connect the whole thing. You'd have a big loop that could go all the way around through the development.
Okay.
Wayland Road, through the town, et cetera. And I think primarily it's a safety measure for Wayland Road.
Okay, thank you. Do you have thoughts on a sidewalk along Wayland, the stretch of Wayland that's existing?
We haven't looked into it. We can take it as a takeaway.
Okay.
You know, just to add
Yeah,
on
hold
that.
on, yeah, go ahead.
Just to add on to that, I would have thought with the development going in, that there would have been sidewalks on Chamberlain all the way to Hidden Row, as well as Wayland to Route 135. So
So I think.
If you guys can take that as a takeaway,
I think we talked a little bit on the,
I mean,
and not to oppose definitely consider that and take it away, but I think we did talk too about, we don't want to, on that stretch of Chamberlain that's scenic and hard, we don't necessarily want to carve into the scenic portion just to put a sidewalk in too. So there was a lot of conversation about the right way to do that.
Just to elaborate, to your point, we did talk about going back through the woods and coming out into the trail, but
Yeah.
then from there to 85, Route 85, it seems like there should be pedestrians. I would like to hear from the neighbors, like this gentleman right here, would they prefer sidewalks or
Yep.
would they not?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and so on Wayland Road, the width is not an issue, there's plenty of
Right.
right of way and plenty of.
Right.
So I think it would be beneficial.
Okay, thanks for bringing that forward.
Just one last point, what we would
Yeah.
have to do is just to consider the constraints that are there today. We didn't analyze Wayland yet. I don't know if there are mature trees that need to come down, stone walls, so we can certainly look at that.
Okay.
At this point, I don't have plans that show me or that depict the existing right-of-way width, so there's some things to look into to make sure that that's even a possibility.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm India Nolan, 26 Chamberlain Street. I guess my concern in terms of traffic would be around the children. I live right as an abutter to Sanctuary Lane, and what I notice every morning and, you know, at the time that the kids are letting out is almost like an ET kind of bicycling group of kids that come off of Angelo and get onto Chamberlain. They're going towards Hopkins. And, you know, they're going right up to Center Trail, and they're coming towards the traffic, you know, that would be coming out of the developments. So, sometimes they're on foot, but a lot of times they're on bicycles, and they're kids, and they're full of, you know, talking and doing all sorts of things. So when we talk about calming measures, I guess I want to know what those are, because it's not just our children, it's children coming onto our streets to get to Hopkins School via Angelo Drive and the other developments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Gary Trendle, 31 Chamberlain Street. You know, I think there's a couple of things to consider too. We do have a new school going in at the end of Chamberlain Street. The Center Trail currently terminates at Chamberlain Street. And if you look at traffic increases actually at the Center Trail, you know, there's currently, I think, 7 or 8 houses from the Center Trail down. We're adding 20 more. So it's effectively a 3x increase in traffic at the Center Trail point. So to Mr. Paul's point, I'm a tremendous advocate of a sidewalk at least going from Center Trail down to the end of Hayden Row. In particular, just given all the school kids, the runners, the people on bicycles, and I think that that's only going to increase as the Center Trail expands, as the new school's there. So just to your point, I wanted to say that I'm a big advocate for it.
I don't get you.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello. I'm Emery Rushlow, 16 Wayland Road, so I would just like to reiterate that I would also like to have sidewalks on Wayland Road. Because it's such a wide road, people tend to drive on it fast. People just zoom up and down that road, and so I just think that we would absolutely need to have sidewalks, given that you have sidewalks after that.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so is everybody okay checking off the traffic study? All right. Stop me if you're not okay. The increased traffic from the new school, I'm not sure that we can control, but is everybody okay thinking that we've considered that?
I think we just kind of discussed that.
Yeah? Just ask. Don't want to assume. Traffic calming measures. Anybody have anything else to add on traffic calming
So
measures?
the woman asked what they would be, and I would be curious what they would be also. Is this the right time to talk about that?
Yes.
Sometimes in the past, if I may,
Yeah.
Sometimes in the past, we've talked about wooden fences made out of the railroad type of truck ties or metal guardrails, just as alongside the street. That just came to mind when you were asking the
I was
question.
just wondering if the developers had any
Yeah.
thoughts.
We haven't explored options, we can certainly ask the traffic engineer to do so, but I would reiterate what was mentioned earlier about the inherent traffic calming nature of this roadway.
Yeah.
It's narrow today, the trees exist, the trees will remain for the most part. When we talk about meandering, it is a subtle meandering road, but it's as little as 18 feet in width. I think that inherently keeps traffic.
So
It's 15 feet.
from my perspective, I would like you to consult with your engineers to see if there's a way to enhance traffic calming, particularly on Chamberlain, just because we've all done several walks and not a single one of us has ever had to look around and see if a car was coming. We've stood in the middle of that street and chatted for 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, and it will be different. So I would specifically embrace that question because, you know, the residents living on the street and in the surrounding area have come to understand that to be an exceptionally quiet street, and I just want to make sure that we have given it a hard look for safety, that as best as possible maintains the quiet nature of that street and the safety. So I appreciate that.
Hi, Isabel Hart, 17 Chamberlain Street. I live at the beginning of Chamberlain Street, and I want to make sure that you also consider traffic calming measures at the beginning, because it's wider there, it's a very straight shot, and certainly having lived there for probably over 30 years, on and off, we've seen a huge difference in the volume of traffic. We don't have the luxury of standing in the street and not having any traffic go by. We routinely walk the street. When we do, the speed limit is posted at 20 miles an hour. And the residents on the street, I think, do an amazing job of being respectful of that. Maybe it's not 20, but it's not 40. But you notice the people that live in the other developments or that are there to drop off kids or pick up kids go flying down there. And so I would ask, what are other traffic calming measures or speed tables? Could those be also considered at the beginning of Chamberlain and not down at the other end?
Okay, thank you.
We did discuss speed bumps, if that's what you're referring to, speed table, but I believe they're no longer allowed in the state, is that?
There are wider ones that we've seen
Speed
versus
tables are
the little bumps.
Bigger, it's shorter, like the bumps and
Good
things.
plateau.
Some type.
I think we
should consider
double
those.
check. Thought we had something in our bylaws on that. Does anybody remember?
It's not in the bylaws, but we have a consultant who
Okay. So there's
assists
nothing
us with that.
specific about.
So would speed bumps be a possibility?
Speed tables.
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 No speed bump, but, right, just speed tables.
Tables.
Is that an option? Phil, I guess I'm looking at Phil, I'm not sure.
Yeah, there are several different, we've installed a variety of different traffic calming features, and we'd be able to provide some input.
Okay, so I think we should leave that item open, because it's.
The only point I would say is we should look at precedents, because I don't think we have speed bumps on any other streets.
Speed tables.
Speed tables, sorry.
Traffic calming.
It's a new
Speed item.
for me too, yeah.
So we just need to consider that when we take that.
Yeah,
point.
no, absolutely, I'm
I think
totally
we
open
haven't
to
had a
that.
need.
What's that?
We haven't really had a need yet with the new development, with
Well,
the traffic and
You can
all this.
argue that many neighborhoods would
Oh, I-
have a need for that.
My neighborhood definitely does, but,
And are we
but
leaving
it's
sidewalks
established.
open too, so we can see sidewalks
So,
potentially on Wayland and?
yes, we'll leave sidewalks open for sure, but off-site improvements, Chamberlain Street, Chamberlain and Hayden Row intersection, increased traffic, is there any need to continue to talk about that? The traffic study, I don't believe supports that, but. Yes, sir.
Hi there, John Fitzgerald, 46 Chamberlain Street. I'm the last house on the right. I have a 9-year-old moved onto that street because of the way the street is, with the trees, with the canopy, with all the kids that walk, ride their bikes, walk their dogs, all the high school kids who run track, who come up and down that street
All
with their
the,
headphones
all
on.
the little old ladies who walk.
Exactly. And I just think that no matter what you say about the tree and meandering, this is a mess waiting to happen. And we've seen it up on Hayden Road, where people have been hit by cars, people are texting. I'm sorry, I just, I really hope you guys really think about this before, with the safety, with all these kids and all these new houses that are gonna be going down there. Once they get to that straightaway or trees, I'm sorry, I have a hard time talking, just, this whole thing makes me nervous, and, just, please, take your time.
I think we all focus on safety primarily as residents and parents and so forth, but I do appreciate your concerns, and we do want to make sure that, and I think that a lot of work has been done too, and I know it won't be the same, and there's going to be work that needs to happen on behalf of, in particular, parents in the area to make sure their kids understand that it is different, it will be different. But we take it very seriously that we maximize the safety considerations.
And last thing, I graduated from the University of Massachusetts with a degree in forestry. Please consult an arborist. I know the town doesn't have one. And if you would like a recommendation, I'd be more than happy to provide one for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, there's one more thought I had. We have tremendous solar glare because of the direction of this street. And in the late afternoons and evenings, depending on the time of year, it's very hard to see. Probably 40 years ago, there was a young child that was killed on our street. He was about 9 or 10 years old. And it was a function of the solar glare. So that came back to me just recently. I know my mother-in-law's lived on the street for forever, it seems, and she had shared that recently. So I think that's one more compelling reason to have some common methods.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
So off-site improvements, D, are we able to move past D? We'll check off D.
Just maybe one question.
Yeah.
Through the chair. Just the impacts of the butters, that maybe you should just throw that out there. From any roadway.
Yeah, that doesn't feel like off-site though to me, does it?
Well, it's in there.
I agree. So I think that we are discussing that. I think that we will continue to keep that in mind. Do people need that to be a specific open item?
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak about that now, while we're here? I guess that's my answer.
Okay, so we're gonna check off D. So we have
Just-
left
sorry,
traffic,
sorry.
hold on one second, and then I will get to you. Traffic calming measures is still open. Sidewalks is still open, yes.
So the impact of the road widening, just had one quick
Yeah.
thought. I would suggest if the developers are willing to plant any trees, new trees on Chamberlain where folks feel that they would be beneficial, road glare, kind of stuff like that,
Yeah,
we-
but that's a good point, and I think that we will end up talking about that when we get to the scenic road trees
Okay.
as well, but yes.
I have a question.
Yeah?
About the intersection with Hayden Road and Chamberlain, where there's a significant impact with additional traffic. In the past, the board has taken the stance, if you break it, you fix it, and we've worked with this developer and other developers in a really positive way. So one concern that we had about traffic on Chamberlain is that there should be a left turn going north onto Route 85 only lane and a right turn going south onto Route 85 only lane. That might help alleviate some of the backup that happens and the additional backup that will happen if there's additional construction. So is that something we should discuss at this point of the outline? Because it's on the outline, but we haven't really discussed what to do about Chamberlain and Hayden Road.
So I guess I started this by saying that I didn't necessarily know that there was, that the traffic study really supported improvements like that, but it's certainly the time to talk about it if you think that it is important. Would the, say it again? Yes, definitely. Phil, do you have any thoughts on right and left turn only lanes?
Yeah, Mike is looking at the numbers right now.
Thank you.
Mike Wazaleski with the Beta Group. You know, looking at the traffic volume projections that the proponent has assembled, in the morning peak hour, they're projecting 39 left-turning vehicles and 10 right-turning vehicles. That's in the morning peak hour on a typical weekday. You know, looking at those volumes, I don't see that volume, I'm looking for the right word, requiring or justifying, you know, a left turn and a right turn lane, you know, for that 1 hour of the day.
Does that include the town's made a significant investment in a new school across the other side of Hayden Row, and there's gonna be additional traffic on Hayden Row, further backing up traffic on all the side streets, but in this one particular, have you considered that in your factioning?
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't, that was included in the numbers, and.
But in as your independent engineer, have you considered that? Is it based on their numbers? Have you considered the town's numbers from the construction project of the new?
Yes, I worked on
Right.
I was involved with the assessment of that new school. And, you know, the numbers that they have here are in line with what was considered for that school.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are people comfortable that we've satisfied D at this point then? We'll leave sidewalks open. We have talked about pedestrian and bicycle safety, but specifically, does anybody have anything to bring up that hasn't necessarily been brought up yet? All right, I'm going to leave it open because it's an open issue that we are going to, you know, maintain consideration of as we approach traffic calming and sidewalks and things like that. But does that make sense that we leave it open? Yeah. Okay. The impact of the downtown quarter project.
I think I added this a while ago, but since that time, we've had a presentation about the Downtown Quarter project, which I think alleviated my concerns. The cars queuing up, heading east on Main Street, they're not gonna queue up back as far as Wayland Road.
So,
Unless anyone else has other concerns.
all right, I'm going to check that one off. Oh, did you have?
I mean, I think I've seen the cars queued up there all the way back to Wayland plenty of times.
But now there'll be an extra lane in the middle.
Every day.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But there's gonna be an
Sure.
extra lane now at that point, so,
When it's done.
yeah, when it's done.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I hadn't really given a lot of thought on that, but I think just my daily commute to downtown, there's always traffic. It's always backed up, and I don't know, maybe it does warrant a little more discussion.
Again,
I think.
Mike, can you speak to that from from the perspective of this development and specifically the Wayland Road end? I think we just covered Chamberlain, but on the Wayland Road where there is substantial traffic in the.
Sure. I was involved with the preliminary design of the downtown project. My involvement in that has been, I don't know, 4 years ago, maybe even more. I haven't seen the latest design plans for the downtown, but from what I'm gathering, it sounds like they may be adding a left turn lane on West Main Street. What you have right now is there's a single lane coming up the hill as you approach, you know, going towards the center of town. If you have one vehicle that's turning left against that oncoming traffic, that backs up everybody down the hill. By even adding a short left turn lane, which is what I'm gathering is being proposed, that can go a long way to helping that queue not back up to Wayland Road.
I don't think that the project though is contributing to to this backup on Main Street.
No, again, going back to the traffic volumes, I lost that page. I want to say that during the peak hour, it was 7 trips that would be exiting Whalen Road, if I remember right. That was 7 additional trips. The total volume would be, bear with me for 2 seconds. The total volume would be 20 vehicles. 7 making the left, 13 making the right going up the hill. So again, over the course of an hour, it's very minimal.
I'm personally comfortable that we've satisfied G, but anybody else?
I'm comfortable. After hearing from Mike, I'm comfortable with it.
Okay, perfect,
I
thank you.
think the left turn lane
Yeah.
would.
I just want to give people a time check, and when we should do our minutes?
We should be
at
finished
least.
by 9:50.
9:50, okay. So we have 11 minutes. That's the 5th grade math mom and me.
We still have Pulte here as well.
Yes,
Pulte's
no,
here
yes.
too.
Oh,
Before we leave traffic and sidewalks
Yes.
in particular, could I just ask for one clarification?
Of course.
We will take away looking at sidewalks, the possibility for sidewalks on Wayland and the remainder of Chamberlain that we're not talking about widening. Direction for the section of Chamberlain that we're talking about widening. Right now, we are not proposing sidewalks or any sort of stone dust walking path. Is there any further direction or takeaway that we should be looking to do there?
So that feels like what I understand as well, except that we're still trying to, as a board, I think, trying to understand a connectivity, a safe connectivity that makes sense, because we are gonna have walkers. You know, recreational walkers, but we're gonna have student walkers, I guarantee it.
Just in reference to the sidewalk at that end of Chamberlain Street, we talked about it a little bit on the sidewalk. There is an existing path partway down the unimproved section of Chamberlain. It does go around the back of Field 13 and connects with the center trail. The wetlands that you'd have to cross would be less than if you put a stone path along the side of Chamberlain Street, and really there'd be minimal vegetation removal to make it a usable, good path.
And that was on the town property, I believe,
Yes.
was Lily proposing to.
So I think that we're on the same page there. I don't think anybody is in a hurry to carve out more of the scenic road for sidewalks.
That's a fair assessment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we have 10 minutes, 9 minutes. Stormwater management. I know, but should we at least start?
Yeah, we can start. The only suggestion I might make is that we might want to, so one suggestion I want to make, talk a little bit more about the underground and utilities, if they're looking for some input.
So I think that
Stormwater.
utilities comes after.
Well, I just wonder if they want to get to that, if we want to
I
get to
think
that
that they
today.
know that you're interested in that.
Okay.
I mean, is that fair to say that, you know,
Well, I think there needs to be some discussion there.
do we not want to do stormwater, Dave? Do we
Well, that's
want to
what
do
I was
utilities?
suggesting, just maybe just
I'm okay with
quickly.
that, 'cause
Maybe we can knock
stormwater
off
is
utilities
big.
and come back
Yeah,
to
yeah,
stormwater, if everybody else.
Okay.
Amenable to that.
Utilities, water, fire, cistern, sewer, gas, electric, phone, cable, solar. Anybody have any questions, or do you have any presentation in any way for this?
I'm happy to give you a high-level overview.
High-level
Let's start
overview.
with water. There's a 6-inch water line that terminates in Wayland Road. There's an 8-inch water line that terminates in this location in Chamberlain Street. We are proposing an 8-inch connection through the entire project, which represents a vast improvement to the
Yep.
water system, taking away those dead-end
Yep.
mains.
It's the only thing I know. Everybody agrees that that's an improvement.
On-site septic, so we're not talking about municipal sewer in this case, and power. Cable is readily available in both Wayland and Chamberlain, as well as gas, I believe.
No gas?
Excuse me.
Never mind, no gas, okay.
You could bring us gas if you want. Sorry?
Gas one stops.
We actually, we are in discussion with Eversource.
About gas?
About that.
Okay. So, I'm
So-
sorry, the folks at home can't hear you. I appreciate that people have commented. I heard that gas does come down Chamberlain to 29, is that right? And that some residents might appreciate the possibility of gas going by the house. How about Wayland? Does Wayland have gas?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, look at that. Any value in connecting?
Clean gas.
Okay. Okay, so that remains a possibility. I'm gonna circle gas just so we come back to it.
You know,
Electric?
one-
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
of course.
Were you going through a certain order?
Well, they started with, he was just high level presenting.
Yeah, sorry, if I could bring it up. So we did briefly touch on the utilities, and it would be a little difficult to put it underground. But, so for the utilities, first question though, for the unimproved section between the end of Chamberlain, where that corner is that gonna be underground?
Yes.
cable? Okay.
Everything from this corner through the project will be
Okay.
underground.
So the point I would make is if you're going to relocate 5 or 6 poles along the, I call it the north side of Chamberlain, it would be, it'd probably be a little bit more expensive for you guys, but it would be beneficial to, why not underground it instead of moving poles and worrying about trees and such things like that?
Quite simply, it's a vast undertaking that I'm not even sure this project can support.
Yeah, I see less shaking heads now, so, but.
It's a spatial issue.
Throw it out there,
It's a
why
cost
not,
issue.
right?
Again, all the new service will be underground, the
Okay.
existing service.
I'm fine with
will
that,
remain.
no, thanks.
Yep, appreciate that. Anybody else have questions on utilities in particular?
Yes, we're talking about electrical, sending the circuit through. At the same time, we're talking about 30, how many houses? 32?
32.
32 more houses with rooftops that should be utilized with solar panels. That way less electricity can be used through the grid and more power can be generated on each rooftop, making the houses more affordable for the new owners and maybe more for profit for the developer. So I hope you consider those solar panels.
And I'll just make a plea for not taking down any more trees than you have to put up those solar panels that you might consider putting up. For me, there's a distinct
We're going to be taking down plenty of trees
negotiation.
to put the houses up. So
Yeah.
they're on a nice slope.
So I'm fine with you considering solar panels. I don't know if anybody has any other
It's kind of
thoughts.
up to the builder.
Well,
and
I mean, as far as the solar, if any individual homeowners, if they want to do that, that's obviously up to them. We're not going to be incorporating it into any of our designs.
I think it's very short-sighted in 2018 to be not considering putting brand-new solar panels in brand-new homes. And
You may be right, but and I may be wrong.
That's
the reason why I'm
Through the chair.
Okay.
And just
Through
a
the
point of
chair.
clarification, we're obviously here for a definitive subdivision, and I'm sure you'll take that into consideration, but it's not even really something that we're talking about as part of this proposal.
Okay, I
In other words,
appreciate
Building
that.
permits
So,
and
I
home
think-
construction.
Through the chair.
Hold on one second.
Through the chair, I mean, if you could just, on the solar aspect, not necessarily putting in solar panels, but at least have a south-facing roof line that would be attractive for solar panels where the homeowners wouldn't object to it. Make it available, make it something that would be viable.
Through the project chair, wouldn't that be up to the builder and the homeowner to make that decision, whether or not they want?
Well, I think it's fair game for the planning board to toss, members of the planning board to toss it out there to consider and I have zero objection to solar panels and solar energy, unless you're cutting down trees, then there's a trade-off for me for sure.
I think,
Yes.
to Fred's point, that we can suggest it. but
Yes.
In the end, it's your
Yes.
decision, so.
Yeah, and I think that it's Irfan makes a good point. If it's a possibility to enable a future improvement for a homeowner, that's good planning. That's awesome. Yeah.
So just to go back to one more point, Mr. Masserani, is that Paul, my brother here, sees the street on Chamberlain as underground to a point that ends at the corner of Tedstone's. Is that correct?
yes.
And you've got 5 poles that are at present there. maybe just in future consideration, try to see if you can't do something about those 5 poles so that we can make the aesthetics and the safety that much better going forward, if you would consider that.
I thought they answered that it wasn't possible.
Well, I don't know if it's not possible, I think,
So anyway, listen, stop, we have 2 minutes. I think we all know where people's, from up here perspectives are. Does anybody else in the audience have utility comments?
I have a utility
Questions?
comment.
Yep, oh, we're out of time. We will, right? So it's not closed, but I think we have, do you have a quick utility comment?
Yes, the moving of the poles is a major venture, and good luck with that, it might take a while. But where are the poles gonna be going, on other people's private property? That's a little bit confusing to
They
me.
literally just need to move 2 or 3 feet within the right-of-way to accommodate the widening.
right. But once you're moving them, my question was pointed to the fact that once you're moving them, and you've got such a beautiful aesthetic going to a certain point, that those 5 poles, maybe it could be cost, not prohibitive, yes, cost
Yes,
prohibitive, but again, maybe.
And I'm going up because we had said
I know,
9:50.
I know.
And we
So-
still have to decide when we can continue this.
Right, and we gotta be mindful too that we have a hard deadline on this hearing, right? So we have to have
So
this
we're gonna move to
decided by
continue-
April 30th.
Move to continue this?
So when's our next available time, I think, is a half an hour on the 26th. Should we take advantage of that? Okay, so entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to March 26th at 9:30.
So moved.
Second.
Point of information, their next meeting with Concom is the 27th. So shouldn't that happen before we meet with them?
No.
We should still continue.
Yeah. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, you're 15 seconds late.
Oh, I was
Thanks for your
closer than
consideration,
anybody
Okay,
else.
we have 2 items we want to cover. One is the review request for off-site signs, Legacy Farms North, Holding Hope, New England. Just as a background, you know, I've been pretty adamant about the sign temporarily, et cetera, to save some time while the applicant's presenting. We have received sincere apologies that didn't quite understand what we were saying. And Elaine and I met with them, came up with some ideas to present to you guys.
Okay.
And everything is in the package.
Yep.
Page? Thank you. I should just look at you. Amy, what page?
So Amy, I'm just gonna have to bring like a computer over your house. You have to load it up for me.
Well, you don't put the pop-up on there, right?
So, you know what, I gotta tell you, I had true confessions, I mess it up every single time, and I need to use my friends, it's like romper room, I need to.
Remember that whole mess it up today, we had to put it on backup on that.
Well, see,
I get it to work
kept
out.
my
I'm
hands
going
on
to
it.
start,
Yep.
in order to get this moving, if you look at page 117, are the pictures of the signs themselves which are being presented. And what came out of our previous meeting was we would entertain directional signs at certain points to encourage people to use the bypass. And I have found out that Legacy Farms Road North is not Legacy Farms Road North, it's just Legacy Farms North. So
Okay.
that's why the term road is not there.
Okay.
Because that's not part of the name.
Okay.
So what is being presented, and I'll let the applicant introduce himself, are A and B, the directional signs, kind of where they hit the public road. Because all these signs will then change when the road becomes public, based on what there's a signage required, a signage kind of package required at the time that the development is over.
So this is just directionally
This
for.
is just for the period of time when The road known as Legacy Farms North is privately.
And we can
No.
expect that to be an extended period of
Correct.
time, so we ought to like the sign.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that there has been a meeting with Design Review.
Okay.
So that's kind of like Prince, the road
Yeah.
known as Legacy One?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Reed Blute, and I work with Pulte Homes. And I want to thank you for listening to my request here at this late hour. But I did submit some information back in early February, and this is, a larger representation. But essentially, I think some of the key things are, you've touched on them already. These are temporary signs. Some are proposed to be at the perimeters of Legacy Farms North, so to speak. And I'll go over those in 1 second. And I'll try to do this rapidly because I know we're on a time schedule, but please feel free to ask questions. One of our key goals here, so the temporary, they're, I believe, in full compliance with the Osmond regulations. The master plan special permit has signed criteria within it, so we don't believe there's any waivers or there's any variances or anything like that. There should be no, concerns about precedent setting. But, that's naturally up to the board to decide. So we're talking about the section on the north side of East Main Street, so down here's East Main, way over here is Cedar Street, Route 85. And what we've proposed is a directional sign at either end, which we've labeled A and B. So A would direct folks to Legacy Farm North to Route 85 North, so that they could use the bypass the way it has been intended to skirt the heavy traffic downtown. And there's been some discussions, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we did meet with the Design Review Board, and they had a suggestion, perhaps instead of 285 North, perhaps have it say to Southborough for folks who were compass challenged, let's say. And same thing over here, instead of to 135 East, perhaps to Ashland. And, those tweaks are certainly fine with us. So, A, be located at the intersection of East Main Street and the Legacy Farm North intersection right now, near where the old historic house is. But there's actually a photo in your package of where it would actually be located. There are signposts there. I'll flip over to that in 1 second. Let me run through this. So B would be a complimentary sign at the other end at 85, and the intersection there with Legacy Farm North. Then we have proposed 2 directional signs, which we're calling F here. I don't know if everyone can see this.
Yeah.
So those are one would be at Franklin, down here, directing people to go on Legacy Farm North rather than turn into Franklin. And the other similar sign will be at the opposite end at Wilson. Again, let me shoot this over. Will be at Wilson Street, and again, that would direct people into the site further. We've also represented some small directional signs that we've labeled E, and they're basically, again, it's almost a 1.5 mile long road. So we've got an E sign here, an E sign here, an E sign here, just to keep people moving along. So, they maintain the momentum to get to the center of where the activity is for the new homes that are being built. Now, let me, here it is. Let me flip over to the location photos. So again, A, which would be this one here, East Main Street. If you're traveling east, I imagine you're all familiar with this intersection. There's the White House there, and there's a sign pole right here, which we propose to locate that directional sign on. Jumping over to the other side, up here, Route 85 Cedar Street and Legacy North, there's currently no pole there, but that location would be the proposed location for that particular sign. There is one there. I think it's, I think it speaks to the Bay Path Humane Society. They have a small sign, so it'll be just in back of that. Now, the other two, the F signs, that will be located on the Legacy Farm property. This one here is the Franklin intersection. That would be right here on these two parallel posts. And then, again, jumping over to the other end at Wilson, just inside Wilson on Legacy North, there's a couple of posts there where we propose to install that sign.
So 2 Fs.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion to accept these as designed, and the reason why is we've got time constraints that we're going, and I believe that they have a right to have directionals to this, and they're temporary as so stated.
Okay, I'm gonna cut you off there so we can have a little bit of discussion. Can we have a second? Let's do a second and then let's discuss.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Okay.
Well, you're saying that they have a right. I'm not sure they have a right to offsite, and I think that's why they're here, is to request our permission. Is the idea here really just to help people find it? Because I would think that real estate salespeople are going to be able to find it.
Yeah, I think there's, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think there's two overriding concerns that we heard. One was, how do we get people to use, we, the bigger sense, the town of Hopkinton, at a previous meeting, Chief Slayman was here. How do we get people to use the, the bypass? How do we get them to use Legacy Farm North? There is a street sign there, but everyday people don't, aren't using it. We're gonna wait.
Okay.
So that was one, and the other was to direct people up to the sales center where homes being built. So,
thank you.
Muriel?
I'm still listening. I'm good.
I like to change about saying the town names with it, but I would like to keep the highway names as well. You don't have to say RTE dot, you just to Route 85 or just Legacy Farm South, Route 85 North, Southborough on one side, and Route 135 East to Ashland on the other side.
So presently, if I may, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. And the last thing, to put the one Peach Street one closer to the Main Street, so people can see it. Right.
Okay. All right, so there's a total of 7 going up, is it?
Yeah.
That's true, yes.
2 green, and then
Two,
2,
and 2, and then 3 of these,
All right.
little ones.
2, 2, and 3.
Are you,
Okay, what's Fran?
Okay, and just where are they, all right, so where are the little ones gonna be placed, right?
Here, here, and here.
Okay.
Okay.
It looks like a short distance on the plan. but
Plans,
it's
and
quite
we're gonna
long.
go in order.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, but
all right, so now, are you proposing what is already present there now, Legacy Farms? You're planning to add signage to that?
Well, the Legacy Farm sign was done by the master developer, Mr. McDowell, and that's staying there.
Yes.
For lack of another term.
Okay.
Our proposed sign would be back 20 or 30 feet from
So
that.
you're not proposing to add that to Mr. McDowell's sign?
No,
Okay.
no, that's not our proposal. Actually it came out of the design review board discussion.
Yes.
I spoke with Mr. McDowell, and he wasn't very receptive, thank you, of that. Although he did give me a letter which I can submit to the board of permission to install the signs if they're approved by the board, so I'll give this to you here.
So I'm fine with the signs because they're relatively temporary, most of them are going to be used like 5 years.
Like a
whatever.
decade or something.
Well, they're selling like hotcakes up there.
Oh, that's
Which brings
awesome.
me to a point.
That's awesome.
Once they sell out that section up north, are you going to have to tweak the signs to point them to the other development?
And that's it?
No, I mean, that's not our intent, no.
Okay. Is it, sorry, maybe I'm getting confused. Is this is for the over 55?
No.
Yeah, right, it's for,
Not over.
so how would,
that's not, 55 is no.
right, I thought so, I just want to double check, but the signs that you're pointing to one sales office, it's
And
going
that's
to remain
staying
there
there.
the whole time, okay, never mind, doesn't matter, right, never mind.
Oh, that's a good question.
That was a good
I
question.
just wanted to go through the comments we made at Design Review Board, just so everyone has heard them, but we suggested adding the words Ashland and Southborough to the A and B, and we thought those were a good idea to have those signs. Let's see, we agreed that the sign Fs are needed at the decision points where people might make a wrong turn. We did think that it might be better if they be placed on Mr. McDowell's sign, because the over 55 development might come to us in a couple months and also want a sign, and then we're gonna have 3 signs at the exact same decision point. It seemed like a lot. If that's the case, we don't really know what the over
If I can make a
55
suggestion, would you be open to, if the over 55 wants to do something, to talk to them about
Sure. the sign.
sharing that sign location, if not
So-
the sign?
It's hard for me to answer, not knowing exactly what.
Right, but I'm saying you're
We're
open to
Meeting
discussion.
them, talking to them, certainly.
Okay.
Yes.
So we also thought those signs were a little bit large, maybe they could be smaller. And then we felt that the breadcrumb signs, the sign E's, were not really necessary, because once you've made that correct turn onto Legacy Farms, you're gonna find the rental office. You don't really need to have the 3 breadcrumbs, is our feeling. I think those were all of our comments.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, we did look at the criteria in the master plan special permit for signage, and the maximum is 24 square feet, and our largest one here is 15. So these are 10, and that's 5. So I appreciate the comment, and I looked into it afterwards. So we are well under that criteria, just so you all know.
Brandon, let me.
Right, just going back, so Mr. McDowell was not open to adding to his sign, because it just seems that you should just combine the 2 somehow. Right? You've got 2 separate signs.
Well, I can probably see
Why?
Mr. McDowell's point, because it's his legacy that is there.
Okay, let's,
Okay.
okay, Muriel?
Okay, I really like the green signs that are at the, pointing out the street. And I guess, I'm not overly thrilled with the other ones necessarily, but I do feel that less is more in this case. So I guess I would agree that maybe you don't need as many, the smaller ones all along.
Sure, I mean, we'd be willing to reduce or remove those if that's the board's direction. We really feel
Just feels
strongly
like
that we
a
need
lot.
these.
Yeah.
And, I think those are.
We want people to find you for sure.
Why don't we make a motion for that, Mayor?
I will make a motion to accept, the letters A and B with the, I'm sorry.
It's an amendment to the motion.
I'll make a motion for A and B with adding the towns, whatever that feedback was, and the larger F and eliminating the E. The larger F sign where you had designated them on your plan and eliminating the E's.
So there's 4 signs instead of 7?
Yes.
You have a second?
Second.
Technically,
Discussion.
there's already motion and seconded, and there was discussion, so there's a.
You're right,
Right.
you're right,
Right.
you're right, you're right, you're right.
So
You're absolutely
friendly
right.
Friendly amendment.
Yes, I'll make a friendly amendment to reduce the signs,
Just
but get rid of the little E's.
How about 2 of them, Mary?
Well, my amendment is to get rid of the
Okay.
E's.
All these?
Okay.
I think we should at least give them 1.
Well, when we get to
Well, we're gonna get
discussion.
to that discussion. Okay, can we move, do we have a second on the friendly amendment?
Second.
Was that, so what was reduced?
So that, getting rid of the smaller breadcrumb, as you described them, signs, letter E,
The
Right.
3 E's.
eliminating the 3 E's,
Oh,
yes.
but that was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Opposed.
Most vote.
He doesn't even have to accept the amendment? If he made the
No.
motion.
Okay.
You accept it, can we do?
He doesn't have to, but.
I really would rather not accept
Okay,
that
there we go.
amendment. Because.
Okay. Okay, then let's take a.
You want to take them as is, right?
Let's
I do.
take a vote
As
on.
is.
As is,
As proposed?
as
As
proposed.
proposed.
Okay, I think we've discussed it. All in favor?
You better be in favor.
Opposed?
No.
No.
So
Not
I'll make a
carried.
motion to eliminate the 3 E's and just to include support for adding the towns on the
Friendly
green
amendment?
signs. Hold on, we need a second.
Second.
Made the motion.
Okay, friendly amendment. I propose that we eliminate 2 of the E's. Everything else stays the same. Give them 1 E for a central location.
Okay. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay.
Let's accept it.
Discussion.
So I will certainly accept a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Not in favor of it, but I will accept it.
So is there a sign in front of the office currently?
Yes, that was permitted
Why do
under,
they need the breadcrumbs at all?
there is one in front of the office parking was permitted under the project approval.
I think, just add,
I
the
think
more
the distance-
development that occurs there, the more
Yeah.
streets and buildings, the harder it is going to find
Right.
the sales center, so.
And that's
But
not-
there is a sign at the sales center.
Yeah, it's right here.
Okay.
Sorry, the sales center is on the right, right, the first one.
Yes.
So you don't really need a sign coming northbound,
So-
because it's gonna be the first
Right,
turn.
Right, so up on the second one from F should stay, and the first one should go, and the other one should go. Those 2 go.
Okay.
And leave the other one
Coming down the hill?
coming down the hill.
That one, yeah.
Just for discussion purposes, keep in mind, the other development will probably be requesting signs too, and it can be a lot of signs. It can add up.
Let's bring this to a vote on the friendly amendment. All in-
Can you repeat the friendly amendment, please?
is to.
Keep one of the E's.
Keep one of these.
Thank you.
That the location.
So total of 5 signs.
What's the location number?
That's what.
And it's, okay.
Near whatever
Circle,
street,
red circle.
whatever street it is.
Okay.
He's willing to work with
All
us.
in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
No.
How many is that, 3?
4 and 4.
4 and 4 tie.
So it doesn't pass.
Doesn't pass. Okay.
So now the next.
What's the feedback from the people, discussion, that voted against it?
Well, I think that's, it.
We
Once
already did
vote,
that.
It's already, so let's.
So let's make another motion.
There is a motion, that was an amendment. There is a motion that eliminates the E's.
Oh, completely? Oh, okay.
Pros and cons. Okay,
All right.
I'm going to take a vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So carried.
4
Thank
signs,
you.
on the 4 signs.
4 signs.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your
Patience.
Well,
collegiality in
thank you all
this.
very
Yep.
much, I appreciate your cooperation.
Okay, thank you. The last item on the, that we can cover, hopefully, approve the minutes from the February 12th meeting.
There are 2 sets of minutes.
And the additional.
I did not have a chance to read it.
Right.
So
That just came out though, right, the second.
it does, I'll move both sets of minutes, because I've read them both.
It was distributed for the previous meeting.
Yeah, they did a Kobe again.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion? All in favor?
A discussion, at some point, we discussed a little bit about the town planner, and then we didn't really discuss it as a committee, so, so that's not in the minutes at all, so let's probably put that on the future agenda to discuss town planner, how we deal with it, how it fits in with, how we work with the town and with the master planning.
And we did have a future agenda item as well for the industrial A and B and how that works too. I just don't want to lose sight of that as well.
And Zach, I just asked about tonight.
And
Oh, yeah.
so let's take a motion on the minute because this will go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All in
Yes.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. And we did interview candidates for the planner position and with a recommendation. So that is ongoing. If the person accepts, I think will be a good.
Before we adjourn, can I ask, I know we're over time.
That, re-signing the Form K, don't
Oh,
forget to do
and
that.
the okay, yeah.
Can I ask a question, though? Because we're under a time constraint on the Chamberlain Wayland, can we preserve space on the first April meeting?
Yeah, can we set aside?
You know what I'm saying? Just to make sure that we have time.
Do we have anything else for that date?
Do we have anything on the April 9th yet?
Yeah, we will. I haven't written it down, but the gas station.
The gas station.
How much time do they?
They didn't
We haven't,
word it
we
right.
haven't put it on there yet.
Oh,
This isn't
hasn't
worded
put on.
right, but-
Why don't we do?
I hate to say it.
Good
Do
job.
we
It's not
need-
recorded,
Muriel, what do
it's,
you got, 2 hours?
it's
Yeah, I
registered
would- I
with the
just wanna get it
Supplemental
done.
6
Yeah.
Registry
Yeah.
District
Let's
of
put
the
2
land court.
hours, 7:30 to 9:30.
No.
Or even just 7 to
I didn't
9,
hear
if we
about
need an
7 to
hour
9.
for the gas station.
And then 9
It was provided by them.
to,
You want to start early?
yes, 7 to 9 and then 9.
Which one is
I
that? Are we
appreciate
starting
it.
early?
Is the gas station on that night?
That's the, we were just talking about that, so they'll, if we start at 7 with Chamberlain, we go 2 hours, they would have a full
No, I know,
hour.
but they're not reserving time because the time expired.
So for future agenda items, could we add somewhere not about the recreational marijuana if we want to
Yes.
come up with a
Yeah.
plan to have some
Yes.
forums about it,
Yes.
maybe?
Definitely.
Maybe over the summer, I don't know.
Yep, I agree.
Good
Does
idea.
everybody need to
When
sign
you
it?
guys were here, there was discussion
5
about
people.
what council was about. Just, Elaine, if friend next meeting videos in,
Like, so I'm gonna be traveling next week, on the 9th, so could I actually dial into it,
Yep.
watch it on the video, does that count as being there?
It does.
Yes.
Can only one do that, or can two of us do it?
I mean, as many as they can accommodate, but a quorum has to be present here.
Right.
So at least 5 have to be in the room.
So,
Okay.
and a quorum of voting members,
I don't
by
know
the
how
way,
many they
right?
could
So Kelly
accommodate.
doesn't count in that.
Right.
So a quorum of voting members
Because I might be away as well on that date.
is 5.
So they would-
But you can vote over the phone too, I mean, if it's not gonna come to a vote, I can't
No,
imagine.
yeah.
But
I
I'm
wouldn't
just saying, you wouldn't miss anything if you were dialed in.
because you're looking at the end of the month to probably have a vote. You have to have.
Well,
Or an
yeah.
extension. They'd have to
And
make
what's
it.
that date on that next one?
26.
March
Yeah.
26th.
March 26th and then
April
April
9th.
9th.
April 9th.
And then on the 9th, you're talking about starting early, is that right?
Yes.
The
Yeah.
9th I will not be here for sure.
It's not in my calendar right now.
Take one at a time.
Just make sure to not miss any.
You can't miss
Motion to
it.
adjourn?
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll
Make a
make that
motion.
motion.
I
Second.
would think we still need to sign this
All in
Form
favor?
K.
Did you vote,
Aye.
you're voting to sign the Form
Oh.
K as well?
Oh,
Can I just throw
That
something
was
out there?
included in your motion?
we signed. Yeah, we're signing it.
Can I just throw something out there? It's not worded right. It's not, it's gonna be rejected by the land court.
Oh, I didn't even read it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't prepare those.
Okay, just, we should all be prepared to re-sign it when they redo it.
Again, before we had, since we didn't vote to adjourn, can we get a motion to sign?
So
Motion to
moved.
sign.
Second.
Discussion.
We're fine.
Right, no, I was just gonna say, the context of, or the background of why it's not gonna be,
But they just didn't word it right. They're saying it's been being recorded at the registered land according to the certificate. They just didn't word it right. It's supposed to say
Registry.
registered at the South Middlesex Registry District of the Land Court, the certificate of title number, blah, 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 blah.
Are you gonna bring us to?
We'd just be, we'll probably, we might have to re-sign it.
alright, do we all have to sign?
5.
Bye.
There you go.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mariel. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We didn't take a motion. Take a motion to adjourn.
So, motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Fran.